as soon as Robin, the recording secretary, gets back, we'll get the hearings underway. So this is the June 1st special meeting of the ZBA, and on my far left over there is Ben Romano, alternate, Kyle Bache, alternate, Pete Broderick, member, I'm Peter Coffin, chair, Megan Kelly, vice chair, Rick Russman is member, and Michael Hulich is an alternate. We don't have Sean Tilton member tonight. There's a death in the family, so we'll be having one of the alternates sit in. And did anybody start this? We haven't had a hearing on this subject yet. So,
DRI.
what? DRI. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was the only vote we taken on this. We made a determination of regional impact on this case, which is what delayed it. So that the neighboring towns and the Rockingham Planning Commission could be notified and receive their 2 weeks notice. So, Mike, would you sit in for Shaw Tilton tonight? Okay. And all alternates can participate. They just won't be voting members unless we lose something in the way. So, just as far as giving the introductions, and this is Robin Carter, administrative assistant, and Mike Hulich will be a voting member tonight, replacing Shaw Tilton.
Peter, am I voting tonight or am I not?
You're not voting tonight. You can participate and ask questions and everything else. So when we come around to votes, just Mike on the alternates will be voting. However, we need alternates to be present so that this goes beyond one night. You guys will know what's going on, and if we have a second person out, we'll need that. Okay, so board business to start off with. We have the minutes of the meeting of May 11th. And has everybody had a chance to read those? They were sent out fairly early and posted fairly early. So I'll take a motion to accept those and any changes you want to make. Okay, go ahead and make a motion and make a change.
All right, so I will make a motion to make one change to the minutes. On page 7, where Lorraine had spoken, should be the same active ingredient as Roundup. It's not that the same active ingredient is Roundup.
Oh,
so
okay.
Another.
Change the I to A on as. Thank you. So you're moving the minutes as amended?
Yes.
Second.
Seconded by Rick Russman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Change? Okay, and any abstentions? So that passes unanimously. No abstentions. All right, the first hearing and the only hearing tonight is Summit Distributing. Acting on behalf of, actually, why don't you come up and introduce yourself, and I'll read the applicant is requesting a special exception from Article 109:7 to allow a retail motor fuel outlet with a 5,100 square foot convenience store, quick service restaurant, and 5 retail fuel dispenser islands, totaling 10 fueling locations, and 3 high-speed commercial diesel islands, which is 2 fueling locations within the commercial 2 district. And as a background, the commercial 2 district does not list gas stations or fueling stations as either permitted use or prohibited use. It does, however, say that if a use is consistent with the area and meets certain criteria that we'll go over tonight, that a special exception can be granted, and so that when you hear the applicant make reference to these 5 items, there are really only 4 that we need to vote on the special exception. That's where it comes from. It comes from the ordinance. As a matter of fact, I can read that so that people in the audience know what's going on here. Special exceptions. If after a public hearing by the board or adjustment, Board of Adjustment, sorry, a proposed business not specifically permitted or prohibited in this zone is found to conform in character of operation and would be in harmony with the permitted uses as described in this zone, then such use may be allowed by special exception of the Board of Adjustment, subject to appropriate conditions and safeguards as may be deemed necessary by said Board of Adjustment. The board shall deny requests for special exceptions that do not meet the standards of this section. And then I won't read all the standards because those have got read to you when the applicant makes his case here. And some distributing is representing GPI, or is it the other way around? GPI is representing some distributing, which is acting on behalf of Kingston Crossing, which is the property owner. Does that get it all right?
Yeah, and I'll just, if you, Mr. Chairman, if you'd let me, I'll do the quick introductions.
Okay.
And introduce the experts and let them talk.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Tom Frawley. I'm the president and owner of Summit Distributing. We're a Lebanon, New Hampshire-based firm that has gas station convenience stores throughout New England, and we're based in New Hampshire. With me this evening is Brian Bouchard, who's with Sheehan Fitty Bass and Green, our attorney in this matter. Heather Montecup with GPI, Greenwood Peterson, she's our traffic engineer, and Frank Montero, also with GPI, who will be doing the majority of the presentation. He's our lead engineer on this. So, and I'm here for any questions that anyone might want to ask related to this project.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we got all the names because come up to me on write it. So
The one you said after Heather.
After Heather, Frank Montero.
Yep.
Monterro.
E-I-R-O.
Oh, yeah, okay. And that's GBI. Okay. All right.
All right. Brian.
Good evening, everybody. How are you? My name is Brian Bouchard. I'm an attorney at Sheehan Fitty Bass and Green in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I represent the applicant. My remarks are going to be almost as brief as Tom's this evening, because I found that with special exceptions, most of the time you need to hear from the engineers and not from me. Briefly, though, I think it's important to remind the board that this project has a lengthy procedural history. This project began before this board in, I think, September of 2021, where this board in October of 2021 granted a special exception for this project under the town's aquifer protection ordinance. That was then appealed to the New Hampshire Superior Court. That decision was appealed to the New Hampshire Superior Court, where it was litigated for almost a year and a half. And in January, the court upheld and affirmed the decision of this board for the special exception in the aquifer protection district, allowing this property to be developed there. Prior to going to the planning board, I believe Mr. Chairman, I believe it was you, sir, noticed that the underlying district for the C2 zone did not include a gas station, either as something that was expressly permitted, nor as something expressly prohibited, which the town's attorney then established would require a special exception, so an application was then filed. I think it's important to remain mindful as we go through the special exception criteria this evening that this board has already previously determined that this project will have no adverse impact on aquifer whatsoever. This board made that decision in October of 2021. And with that, I will turn it over to Frank.
I need to correct misconception. There's a couple things. First,
sure.
The decision of the ZBA was not appealed. It was someone appealed the decision for a rehearing.
Which was the decision of the ZBA.
Right, but it wasn't the decision. It wasn't the decision of the board to grant a special exception that was appealed. It was a decision to conduct a rehearing that was appealed.
Yes and no. An abutter requested a rehearing.
Right.
This board
that was appealed, not the Superior Court.
Well, hold on. An abutter requested a rehearing. This board granted a rehearing. The decision for a rehearing was appealed.
Right.
However, once the case came to the Superior Court, the parties, in an effort to be as efficient as possible, then took up the appeal of the underlying decision as well, because the abutter in that case also had issues with some substantive matters as to what the board was determining, particularly whether the board, if I have this right, whether the board altered the special exception criteria. That issue was entertained and considered by the New Hampshire Superior Court, and the New Hampshire Superior Court decided that what this board decided was proper and affirmed the decision of this board. The Superior Court also decided that a rehearing was not necessary because the rehearing was on a procedural ground of whether the holders of conservation easements were entitled to notice. The Superior Court said that those holders are not entitled to notice of the statute. So, Mr. Chairman, yes, in one respect you are absolutely correct. It was an appeal of rehearing, but once it landed before the doorsteps of the Superior Court, it also became an appeal of the substantive underlying decision of the board.
Thank you. And what was the last thing you said? I just go back and
With the decision that the board determined that there would be no adverse.
oh, yes, that was not the decision of the ZBA. The ZBA granted the special exception with the conditions that any requirements to protect the aquifer protection, the applicant would agree to any conditions applied by the planning board in their review to create, to address the safety of the aquifer. So that, the conditional use, the special exception was granted by this board, but the conditions were that any requirements to meet the safety of the aquifer would be addressed, could be put on the plans, but which is true anyway, so it's kind of redundant. But
Yeah, I mean, the board determined the proposed use will not detrimentally affect the quality of the groundwater contained in the aquifer by directly contributing to the pollution or by increasing the long-term susceptibility of the aquifer. That's what the board did decide, and then the board did add a condition, but
what were you reading from there?
I am reading from the board's decision, which are in my notes.
Could you slow that down, please, and say it again?
The proposed use will not detrimentally affect the quality of the groundwater contained in the aquifer by directly contributing to the pollution or be increasing the long-term susceptibility of the aquifer to potential pollutants. That was one of the special exception criteria. That's one of the criteria the board had to find in order to grant the special exception, and that the board did make that finding. The board did also add a condition to that, saying that, well, anything else that the planning board wants to add in terms of safeguarding the protection of the aquifer, the special exception was going to be conditioned on that. But the board did make this finding. It's from the minutes of October 2021.
All right, sorry.
Long digression. Sorry for speaking.
No, that's okay. I
It's a bad habit.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you're saying that the previous board, this previous ZBA, found that it did not affect the aquifer?
The previous ZBA
Or made the decision that it didn't?
made the decision that the criteria that I just read was satisfied. And that criteria is the proposed use will not detrimentally affect the quality of the groundwater contained in the aquifer by directly contributing to pollution or be increasing the long-term susceptibility of the aquifer to potential pollutants. So in order to get a special exception, that criteria had to be satisfied. The previous board made the determination that that was satisfied, subject to the condition that the planning board could add additional conditions if it wanted. Okay, and if there's additional questions on that.
I got the easy part. For the record, Frank Montero, I'm a professional engineer with GPI, located in Salem, New Hampshire. We're the site engineers for the applicant on this project. I'm just going to hand out some hard copies of the exhibits we submitted with the application, if that's okay.
Okay. We have the plans, but we don't have the photographs.
Do you have the color one?
No.
Right there, we'll do this. All right, so those sheets that I passed out, those were submitted with the zoning board application. The full set of drawings we have are actually submitted to the planning board, which will be heard by the planning board on June 6th. So the two different exhibits we're going to discuss today. So these drawings were submitted with the ZBA special exception application. The first one's an overview of the site, just to reorientate people on where we are on the project. This is Route 125 at the bottom. 107 tees in to the intersection where the proposed access point is for the proposed retail motor fuel development. Church Street is down here. Some of the abutting uses, Carriage Town Plaza in this corner. We have LA Clearwater up here, the self-storage units, Mark's Auto. And Bluebird Lane is located down here in this area, about 1,300 feet from the lot lines.
Can you point to that?
Bluebird Lane,
Go down
here. About 1,300 feet from the property line of the proposed gas station use. Little River back here is about a quarter mile from the lot to the rear. So that kind of orientates what's going on. The lot lines are actually being adjusted through the planning board process. I know you've seen this before, but I'll just go with the basic history. There's two parcels involved in the development. Lot 16 is a larger parcel to the rear. Lot 15 is a smaller parcel to the right, to the front. Lot 15 is currently about a 13.8 acres parcel, and lot 16 is currently about a 25-acre parcel. So the lot line now between the two lots does kind of this angular movement through those two parcels. So part of this development is to adjust the lot lines to kind of square them off a little bit to what I've shown here in pink. So this new lot 15 will be more rectangular or square in shape. The new area will be 10.2 acres. So it's a little smaller, and then this blue area here will be cut off as lot 15 and appended to lot 16 in the back. So the plans that you see tonight are assuming this lot is in existence, which is what the planning board will be discussing through the lot line adjustment plan. This is another exhibit that was in the application. This is basically the site plan sheet that was submitted to the planning board. It's been rendered for clarification, but as discussed in the special exception application, the retail motor fuel outlet consists of several parts. We have a convenience store located here on the property, the retail fuel canopy in the front, and then the diesel canopy on the side of the convenience store here for trucks. As mentioned, the special exception for this use in the C2 zone just applies to the gas station portion. The canopies here and here. The convenience stores are permitted use by right. Drive-through quick service restaurant that will be in the store is permitted by right. So I just wanted to clarify that. Some other general site features. So as part of the application.
Got trouble on our course. Grounded.
working again. All right, so just in terms of general features on site, the convenience store is 5,100 square feet. There's a drive-through lane around the back of the building with a pickup window on this side of the store. We have parking in the front, on the sides, as well as on the left side of the building. The dispensers in front, we call them 5 multi-product dispensers that can fuel 10 vehicles at one time. So each dispenser can have a vehicle on each side at one time. So the full capacity of this is 10 vehicles if it was fully occupied. And then on this side, these are diesel fuel pumps. We call them high-speed pumps because the nozzles work at a faster speed than the nozzles out front, because the trucks have larger fuel tanks. So we have 3 dispensers, but there's only 2 fueling lanes because the trucks have tanks on both sides of the truck. So we provide a dispenser on each side to facilitate that process and speed it up. So that's why that's kind of an odd number. Between those 2 fuel structures, these are the proposed underground tanks here. There's three underground tanks. Basically, there'll be fuel piping running between these tanks to each of these canopies. Access to the site, and Heather will discuss this later, but we're proposing the 4th leg to this signalized intersection that will be built here. And there's several road improvements that would have to be done as part of this project. That'll all be vetted out during the planning board process and the New Hampshire DOT process. They will also be reviewing that in terms of the construction details. So this is a basic site layout. I'm just going to go through the special exception criteria for this particular special exception. There's 5 criteria the board needs to review with respect to the retail fuel use that's proposed here. And basically, the first one is that there's no detriment to property values in the vicinity or change in essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or business and industrial districts on account of location or scale of buildings or other structures, parking area, access ways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, or other pollutant, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, or other materials. So that's the first standard we have to address. So in the application, we did submit an attachment to address each of these 5 criteria. Just going to read it back to you. And then at the end, if you have any questions, no idea what's.
Hang on a second, you got it.
I don't believe it's you, I think it's the Russell.
Can you check, everybody check their microphones, make sure you don't have anything public?
That did something. Okay, so back to that first standard for the special exception. Let's talk about the neighborhood. I have that overview plan a little bit. We went through that quickly, but basically, the neighbors of the proposed lot 15, which is a new configuration. We talked about Allied Clearwater and Mark's Auto to the north of that site. We have moving a storage company and DOT land across the street. This is DOT land here. The storage facilities up to the north of that side. We mentioned Bluebird Lane. I bring that up. There is the closest residential use is down here on Bluebird Lane, and that's from the property line to that house is about 1,300 feet plus or minus with the aerial photo. And we're suggesting that this proposed use would not negatively affect any of the neighborhood characteristics. With respect to the residential area, we feel the distance separating the facility to that house, in our professional opinion, will not be a detriment to the property values of the essential characteristics of this residential neighborhood down here, which does not have clear visibility of this site. The use is consistent with other commercial uses in the area. Obviously, Carriagetown Plaza with the TD Bank facility, which has a drive-through component. The Dunkin' Donuts here are compatible uses to what we have. So we feel it certainly fits within the neighborhood. The architecture for the building, there is an exhibit that I attached to the ZBA application that touches on the architecture for the proposed facility. It's quite unique for a retail motor fuel outlet. This is the proposed convenience store. The front view to 125 here, obviously it's designed like a barn type structure. This applicant here is one of the few retail marketers that will go to this extent on architecture. You know, we have built this building in a few places in Vermont. I think it'd be one of the finest convenience stores, certainly in New Hampshire, when it's built. And then even the canopy, typically you'll see a flat deck canopy with a white fascia. This complements the building architecture with the peaked roof and some dormers on the front to pull in the barn motif of the convenience store. So basically we feel this fits in with the character of the neighborhood and is not detrimental at all in terms of standard number one. Standard number two really addresses traffic. And I'll read the standard. It says, no creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity would occur from the development. So obviously there's gonna be a lot of people reviewing this on the state level with the DOT and with the planning board and the third peer reviewer. So there's a lot of eyes on this, but basically the proposed retail motor fuel outlet will not create a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in level of traffic congestion in the vicinity of the project site. The driveway permitting authority on this section of Route 125 is under the jurisdiction of the New Hampshire DOT. Based on a thorough traffic engineering analysis that our office has prepared, as required by the New Hampshire DOT, the applicant has demonstrated that the proposed project can be safely and appropriately accommodated based on the projected site-generated traffic volumes. In order to ensure safe and efficient access and egress to and from the site, the applicant is committed to substantive off-site mitigation measures, including traffic signal control and the construction of auxiliary turn lanes on 125. So the New Hampshire DOT has preliminary consented to these off-site mitigation measures as commensurate with the project's impact on the adjacent roadway system, and the applicant is anticipating issuance of a New Hampshire DOT driveway permit upon review of the final design plans. So we have our traffic engineer here, Heather Monacup, and I'm just going to ask her to give you a brief update on where she is with the traffic component with the DOT.
So again, good evening. I'm Heather Monacup with GPI, and we're also the traffic engineers for the proposed project. So a full traffic impact and access study was prepared for the project. It was submitted to the town. It was also submitted to DOT, as we've explained. It's a Route 125 is a DOT roadway. We require a driveway permit and all of their review for the driveway access, as well as any off-site improvements associated with the project. We have received comments from the Bureau of Traffic, NHDOT, from District 6, as well as Highway Design. So we have those all in hand. We've been waiting for these meetings to move forward and proceed with those. The full traffic study was prepared in accordance with a scoping meeting that we had with DOT. It includes existing conditions, no-build conditions, and future conditions, so with and without the project. As stated, our driveway is proposed opposite Route 107, Marshall Road there. There is a distribution center that has been approved locally to the north. As part of the scoping meeting with the DOT, we were asked to look at this project both with and without that in place. So the traffic study not only looks at our impact with the distribution center traffic and any mitigation associated with that, also without it. So we have looked at this intersection with the site with a traffic signal and without a traffic signal. As part of the distribution center, it is part of their mitigation to signalize this intersection. This intersection today does meet signal warrants, so whether this project goes through or not, it is expected that a traffic signal would be in place as long as that distribution center moves forward, which I think is the intention of that project. Excuse me. So as part of the development, not only will a traffic signal be included at this intersection, we will further have to expand and put in a southbound left turn lane into the site and a northbound right turn lane into the site. This concept plan that is before you was provided in the traffic study. It's been submitted to DOT. Highway Design takes a good look at it. We've seen their comments. They've asked for minor changes like this 10-foot right turn lane. They want to see a 12-foot right turn lane, but we have no inclination from NHDOT that we can't move forward with formal design documents. So as soon as we are kind of more forward with this, with the town and the planning, we will address their comments and prepare final design documents. With the traffic signal in place in the turn lanes, we're expecting good operations, level of service C for the overall intersection. So with that, you know, with the project in place, with the mitigation in place, we do think that we can say that it's not expected to have any adverse impacts due to traffic to address that criteria because of the offsite mitigation that we're doing. So I'll turn this back to Frank to go through the rest of the special exception criteria, and then we can answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so the third standard for the special exception is that no excess demand on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, police, fire protection, and schools. So it's our opinion that there is no excess demand that will be placed on any municipal services for the following reasons. With respect to sewer, we're not on sewer. We'll have a private septic system located approximately back here behind the site. That should be privately owned, and that would be approved by the New Hampshire DES as part of the approval process. Number two, the applicant will contract with a private waste disposal company for this project, so there's no municipal demand there. With respect to fire suppression systems, we'd have a fire suppression system proposed for both of the fuel canopies. It's a dry chemical extinguishing system that would be fully automated if there were an event to occur at the fuel dispensers that would set off those suppression systems. There'll be no increase to the school system for a commercial entity, obviously. So we feel that we meet that standard. The fourth standard relates to no hazard to the public or adjacent property on account of potential fire, explosion, or release of toxic materials. So I'll just touch on the fuel storage system. So we have a state-of-the-art fuel system proposed, which includes double-wall underground petroleum tanks, as I mentioned, located in this area. We also have double-wall piping for the fuel lines that run between those tanks and the dispensers. We have several different types of leak detection equipment that are part of the fuel system, and kind of summarize those in that attachment I handed out. It's pretty detailed and technical, but basically everything that's in there in these fuel systems would have to receive New Hampshire DES approval, which is very stringent in the state of New Hampshire. So we'd be going through that whole process as well. But if you have any questions on that summary, I'd be glad to answer them. In terms of the drainage system, we're designing several safety and treatment systems as part of the stormwater design. There's several redundant features at this point. The system's fully designed at this point as we've submitted it to the planning board. But basically, in a nutshell, any stormwater that runs off either fuel area would end up going through several oil-water separator components and discharge into a lined above-ground bioretention pond in the back. There's actually two of them for that purpose. And this whole drainage system's actually been approved by the Hampshire DES already as part of the alteration of terrain permit. So we're pretty well along with that design. But in terms of the runoff from the site, we have two bioretention ponds, as I mentioned, with lined bottoms. Prior to getting to those lined bottoms, there's oil water separators, physical oil water separators underground. There's two chambered systems to accommodate the flow. We also have deep-hooded catch basins. We have some other oil removal devices, first defense units that are put inside each catch basin to further trap potential oils. But there's a series of redundancies in that treatment train. So with the minor spillage that might occur from this site, any runoff to the catch basin is the first capture point. So any first defense unit has a hooded outlet on that catch basin, so the oils can float and be detained in the catch basin. So that's the primary point that potential spillage or maintenance could be done at the catch basin. If any product flowed beyond the catch basin or the multiple catch basins on the site, they all come together through an oil water separator structure. So based on the piping for the site, we have two oil water separators. They're basically concrete tanks. And those are larger in size. 3,500 gallons is one, the other one's 1,500 gallons. And those are sized based on DES criteria for containment based on the acreage that drains to those watersheds. So that's an additional capture point for any potential minor spillage that might occur at these fuel islands. Furthermore, if the containment didn't meet that warrant, that would flow into the bioretention ponds, which are larger ponds to the rear, which are lined, and they're lined so they don't infiltrate. Those two are designed not to infiltrate. So again, if any contamination were to go past the redundant features and end up in that basin, it can be isolated and cleaned if necessary, and that's how we design the system. So there's a series of redundancies for that purpose. Because we're in the aquifer zone and some of the other standards that the town has, we also need to provide infiltration. So what we do there is we separate out the non-petroleum fueling areas with the way the site's graded. So for instance, the roof runoff from the buildings and the canopies is piped to a different area. Now those would be infiltrated. Basically, behind the store where there's no fuel pumps or anything like that, that pavement gets routed to a different area. There's two infiltration basins that are included in the design to infiltrate the groundwater as part of the aquifer ordinance requirements. So a lot goes into the design of the stormwater runoff, which is important for this location. And all those systems have an operation and maintenance schedule that goes along with the drainage calculations and the alteration of terrain permit that gets issued by the DES. So those have to be maintained and records sent to the DES as part of that AOT approval process. So in a nutshell, that's how all the drainage is designed. As Brian mentioned earlier, the ZBA did grant the special exception in October 21 under Article 201, noting that the proposed fueling components would not have any adverse impact on the aquifer or the quality of the groundwater. So we feel we meet that standard number 4 based on that design. The fifth standard is just a notification of the hearing tonight, be provided to the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, and the Board of Selectmen, and we've done that process. So that's the fifth standard. So based on that, I'll conclude with my presentation, and we'll just entertain any questions the board may have. Thank you.
All right, before we get to public comment, take questions from the board.
Can we hear from other people and then
Normally we would, while it's still fresh, take questions and then we can go, public comment and take, in this case, we'll have a response that's part of the correspondence that, will be presented. But, before we even get to that, there's some questions, that I think we answered. Kept on referring to, oil water separators and detention catch basins, and then going to all the water separators. My question is, once it's separated, where do the oil and gas, the hazardous compounds go?
Yeah, they're designed to be stored in those units, and they get vacuumed, stored in the concrete chambers, the boxes that are underground. So any accumulated oils over time would float to the surface and be contained in those structures. And then the annual maintenance, those structures would get vacuumed out and cleaned as part of the O&M process.
Okay, so actually, Conservation Commission had this question. It was what the maintenance schedule and who's enforcing it and all that. That I know from experience is all part of the procedure of the planning board, but when we asked this question at the hearing a couple of years ago about whether the oil and gas materials were removed from the site, and the basis said no, that they weren't removed from the site. Obviously, in a spill situation, a considerable spill situation, they would have to be. The maintenance, presumably the periodic maintenance, the contaminants must be removed from the site.
Yes. There's a typical O&M kind of schedule for ongoing maintenance, assuming there's no spills. Okay, just typical. You can have minor drippage at the dispensers. You see it. So when it rains and any of those minor spills end up in the drainage system, we want to capture them somewhere. So we want to be able to capture them and remove them physically by vacuuming out structures. We don't want it to keep flowing downstream and ending up, somewhere where it shouldn't. So I wasn't at that meeting. I'm not sure what was asking.
We were asking in the catch system that we talked about. When was the contaminants removed, and are they taken off site? And the answer was no, they aren't taken off site. I mean, that was something that we felt.
Well, if there's a leak, if there's a leak and the state's notified, it has to be cleaned up and removed from the site.
Right. Yeah, but I'm talking about the stuff that gets caught in the catch basins and floods with the separators.
Now there'd be an annual maintenance contract with a stormwater compliance company. There's several out there. So as part of any alteration of terrain permit with the New Hampshire DES, they require, as part of the submission, an O&M plan. So in that plan, which is in the drainage calcs that were submitted to the planning board, it'll tell you what you have to do on an ongoing maintenance basis. So, I mean, there's sediment runoff that come off of these, every time there's salt or sand. In the winter, all that sand's got to go somewhere. So the catch basin sumps are designed to capture that sediment. Those need to be pumped out occasionally. It's going to build up if you don't.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick one more response to your question about the meeting from October 2021, which I understand was a year and a half ago. I have the minutes in front of me, which read, quote, she described the Sorry.
Can you come up to the microphone?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Speaking of spills, she described the retention area materials, asked what happens to oil in the catch basins. Ms. Duquette said that if it's just a film, it remains in the catch basins until they are maintained and vacuumed out, end quote.
Okay.
Is that clear, Mr. Chairman? So
Yeah, as long as there's a system that it's not just put into retention ponds and allowed to evaporate and things like that. There has to be a way of removing it from the site.
No, there's extra design features incorporated into this site. Sensitivity of the location. So a lot of these redundancies, some of the redundancies we have aren't required by the state. go above and beyond. So, in addition to the stormwater, we do the same with the actual fuel system design, so that it meets or exceeds the EPA requirements. So, I hope I answered that. Other questions?
Yeah, you get close to the mic. Is that a class C fire retardant?
Yeah, it's a dry chemical extinguisher that will put out a gasoline fire. The diesel fuel area is not flammable like the gasoline, so that's different, but in most, let's say most states in the country, you don't have to do anything. So, the state of New Hampshire does not require a fire suppression system in the United States. So, this applicant's proposing to put those in as a matter of safety. So, Massachusetts might be one of the few states in the country that require fire suppression. And in Massachusetts, you don't have to even put it into the diesel fuel. So, in this instance, because of the sensitivity of the project, the applicant agreed to put in a fire suppression system. It's a dry chemical. It's like a baking soda powder. It's the same product. Difference is that these two are not really expecting a fire to occur out there because it's the type of product that puts out fire. Because the applicant is designing and safety improvement system, will provide pre-treatment and treatment. You don't mention in the application package, give us the maintenance or removal of contaminants, the maintenance of the system, but I've heard you mention it now. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Conservation Commission had that comment. Emergency responses procedures will be developed. So you've used the future tense in all these, and I think in order to get this, there's going to have to be some indication either in a condition of approval or before approval that the systems that you have designed will be are in place. Yeah, absolutely. The intent of that narrative is kind of like it's meant that it will be done. It's not like it may be done. Everything that we state in the application will be done. It's currently in the plans now before the planning board. So that's fine if you want to condition that accordingly.
Okay. If there's no other comments immediately, we can do. Go ahead, Peter. Yeah.
You're able to number of stations throughout the state, and it's how is this successful?
Pete, you're gonna have to.
I understand.
Yeah, microphone's over here.
I'm so used to talking to the person. All right. So my question is basically, you have other stations. What have been the problems with leaks there, or have there been any?
Well, I'll let the applicant speak to that, Tom.
Yeah, I can speak to that from a couple of different perspectives.
Can you come up here, because that is an important question that we,
Yeah. Number one, not only am I a petroleum distributor and supply over 140 stations throughout New England, I'm also the chairman of the Oil Fund Disbursement Board for the state of New Hampshire. So for the last 27 years, I've sat on a board that manages underground storage tank leaks and those systems. So I can certainly speak to those issues. And with the systems that you see today, compared to gas stations that were even built 20 years ago, we see a diminishing amount of spills, leaks, and issues related because of the systems that Mr. Montero just described to you. So what problems we see today are surface spills and things to that effect. We're dealing with older gas stations. You know, as far as the state of New Hampshire is concerned, we're seeing a diminished number of new gas station issues related to leaking underground storage tanks, piping, dispensers failing. So I'm not sure if that answers the question you were looking to answer, but we're just not seeing those things happen anymore.
No, the reason I'm asking that is I read with interest your, this is from GPI, I'm sure everybody has it, and it talks about fuel storage systems, and even the attendants have to be trained in A, B, and C, I believe.
Correct.
You know, it was kind of like, what are they going down space? I mean, double wall piping, overfills, vapor prevention, you know, I don't want to go through them all, but I mean, you've got 6 just on fuel dispensing, you've got 7 on fuel storage systems, and you've got emergency preparedness, and then training. So I was curious, to say the truth, because there's so much there, I was curious, is there a problem? Because there's so much prevention here and so much training here and everything. I thought, why would that be in place unless there was,
Well, it's a lot of preventive maintenance is what it comes down to, and we've learned over the years, this is the type of training, and you know, we need the human component to be trained on how to manage these things for the things that happen on site. When somebody drives into a gas station and drives over a dispenser, and we need the systems components that fail safe and are redundant for that. So, you know, we're very confident that, you know, we've got things that in place today that really go above and beyond to protect the environment.
well, it's just that there was so much that it kind of like, what somebody, you know, it was a little bit over, I shouldn't say overkill, but it piqued my interest that
Moved from gasoline by the EPA, yeah, MTBE, now it's ethanol, so ethanol is in the fuel now, where MTBE used to be that additive.
right.
So, you know, a lot of these issues, a lot of these items that are in this summary have evolved over the years through learning what happens, and most of it relates to the use of the facility. It's not as much how the facility is designed on the ground, because it's as good as you can get, but it's the person that's gonna use this and drives off with a hose in their car, or overfills a gas can, things like that. So that's why we focus, the state of New Hampshire, the DES is more focused on surface spills now than they are with well, as much as the underground system itself. So the DES just did a study, I think it was a 10-year study, and of issues in the state of New Hampshire, and they found no failures of tanks. There was nothing related to double wall fiberglass tanks, which is the state-of-the-art tank that's been used for several years now. You still have some steel tanks, double wall steel tanks, fiber-coated steel tanks, there's other kinds of tanks, but they found no leaks because of tanks cracking, like fiberglass tanks, so that's great. There's issues with spillage and some fuel lines, so there's extra safety features that are put in the fuel lines themselves. In the old days, there was no way to detect a leak that might have been going on for a year in a gas station for pipe was leaking, because nobody monitored the inventory of the tank. So the electronic monitoring for these systems, everything's monitored electronically in the store. So every gallon of gas that gets delivered to the underground tank gets reconciled with every gallon of gas that leaves the facility. You know, to minute numbers. So this is how they detect if people are stealing gas from them at the pumps, or if they're siphoning gas tanks. This is the level of detail that they can see that something's going on. So if there's any discrepancy, number one, they look at those issues. If they don't reconcile those, then they look at the piping. But there's so many other issues with advances on the piping. For instance, this pressurized leak line detector. So every time you pull that trigger on the hose, there's like a delay before it starts, coming out of your nozzle. So what the system's doing, it's doing a pressure check on the fuel line. So when you pull that, it's making sure there's still pressure in that line. And if there isn't, it doesn't let you start filling up the tank. So it knows that line's tight and it's not leaking. Another surface spill issue is potentially when the underground tanks get filled by the fuel tank. They connect the big 4-inch hose to the ground. In the old days, the guy would pull it off the ground and there'd be some fuel left in the hose, and would spill on the ground. All right, well, we don't do that anymore. We have containment buckets at each fill riser, a 5-gallon kind of manhole. So when he pulls off that 4-inch line, anything that comes out of the hose goes in that containment bucket, which goes back in the tank. So those are the little things that are listed in here that help prevent spillage. The spill containment grooves around the islands. New Hampshire didn't have those maybe 15 years ago. Now they require little grooves in the concrete pads around each dispenser. And those are designed to capture 5 gallons of gas. That's the calculation that they have us do. So if there is a spill at the dispenser, that's the initial capture point, those spill containment grooves. That'll contain a 5-gallon spill before it even leaves the mat and goes to these other areas we're talking about. So all these little things that are listed in here, shear valves under the dispensers, things happen, car takes out a dispenser. In the old days, fuel would be going and you get a fire. Now there's a valve, it's a poppet valve, and the supply line that comes up under the dispenser. If that gets sheared off, the valve automatically closes the fuel, so you can't have any fuel leaving. Another example is under each dispenser, there's a sump. There's a fiberglass sump, it's about 30 inches deep, foot wide. So if there's any leaking in the piping under the dispenser or all the mechanicals, it goes into this containment sump and it can't go in the ground. And then there's an electronic sensor in there that tells the guy in the store, hey, there's something in that sump. Alarm goes off and then they go check it. So those are the kind of things that are in here, those redundancies that have been built into these systems over the past 20 years. And they're much better than they used to be. And now we're finding that the biggest concern from the DES is surface spillage. So we're trying to address those things through the drainage design, like I explained. Not every gas station does that. We've designed hundreds of these things around the country, so we know what works and what doesn't. So all these little things, you put them all in the design to help prevent this issue you read about. and nothing's fail-safe, but the better you can add, the more redundancies you can add, the better you're gonna isolate a potential spill. And that's what we try to do. So, I wouldn't look at these as being suspicious because there's a bunch in here. Those are just kind of explaining, if you wanted to dive into some of those things, that those are the added safety features we put in the design.
And I would just add that all of the alarm systems and electronic monitoring are also managed remotely. So we don't just depend on the station operators.
So if your station operator or your remote system were to say, find out there is a leak and it's been detected, who responds and how long does that response time usually take?
Well, typically what happens is if an alarm leak for a line or something like that shuts the line down. So it immediately shuts that submersible pump off. Think about your well at home. If you suddenly had a leak in your piping somewhere, the sump would automatically shut off because of the sensors that are built into this. So what happens is we have staff that's on 24/7. So they immediately would contact the station if it happened to be overnight. When the station was closed, we'd send a maintenance contractor out there. We have 24-hour spill response contractors on call 24/7. As part of our insurance, they require all of that. So we have the ability to respond to these things, within minutes, hours, quickly. But the more important thing is that the system's shut down. So if there was a leak in a line, which is double wall to begin with, it's probably leaking into the outer line, but it still shuts it down, and then we have the ability to, respond to the maintenance contractor.
Just an observation, with all the modern stuff, I think somewhere in there it said that the truck driver that delivers it still measures it with a stick, which I thought was kind of amusing, given all the...
That's just another redundancy. They physically, the trucking companies still require the drivers to physically stick the tank because they may not be able to get access to the electronic system. The store might be closed, so they physically still stick the tank. We keep manual sticks. And so we have the electronic system is telling us how much in the ground. What's the 90%? It shuts off at 90%, so they can't overfill a tank. Okay, there's a valve in there that shuts it off automatically at 90%, so it prevents them from overfilling a tank. But the manual sticking is just a sort of a redundancy. But I can see live any tank taken with delivery.
That's the first step. You got to stick the tank. And when they order fuel for the tanks, they know the volume that's exactly in the tank and how much it can take for additional fuel. It's got to float in there. So Tom knows at every instance how much fuel is in each tank wherever he is in the world. So when they order fuel, when it gets low, they know exactly how much to order. So it's very unlikely the tank's going to get overfilled. But part of the electronics that's been approved over the years is that monitoring, that gauge that's physically in the tank, telling everybody, hey, maybe the guy can't read a stick, so we better find another way to check this. And that's why the technology evolved to where it is.
Am I correct? I think I read it here that the drivers cannot top off the tank, if I can use that term. They can only be 90% full.
Correct.
Right, so you can't overflow it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's two valves that could be in a tank, not to get too technical, but the overfill prevention valve will shut off when the tank's 95% full. If you have an audible alarm, sometimes you'll see an audible alarm out of the tanks, which is a visual light that lights up if the tank's being overfilled.
Well, that's what confused me. Yeah. Right? Because when I read this, I said, okay, the driver pulls up and puts his hose in. How does he know that you're at 95%? That concerned me, because okay, he's got it hooked up, and he's saying, fine, and the meter's running, and all of a sudden, again, I don't know, so that's why I'm asking. You hook up your hose, and you start filling.
Well, before you
somehow it's got to go to 95.
It's a good question. Well, the first thing is...
The point. Don't put any more in.
The first thing is what I mentioned about ordering. Okay, they never want to order more than the tank can fit. So they know electronically the calibration of the gauge that's in each tank. When Tom orders fuel for a tank, he knows exactly how many gallons can fit in the tank. So he's not going to order more than that. So the truck, when you see a fuel tank get delivered, it doesn't mean it's full of fuel 100%. They're just delivering the amount of gallons that can fit. They go to one site at one time, and everything that's in that truck just gets delivered to that site, and then they go back to the terminal and do it.
And what the drivers have to do is their trucks are typically 4 or 5 compartments.
Okay.
And each compartment, when they load at the terminal, they're loading 2,500, 4,000 to that. And before he opens a compartment, he's verifying that an entire compartment can fit in the tank.
Okay,
Because
that's,
he'll ruin his
it's
day
not
if
one
he-
big tank, but,
Yeah, it will ruin his day if he gets stuck, unable to deliver.
okay.
And so we manage that automatically, so that they're, it's electronic, and then we have 2 dispatchers who are making the decisions before they send a truck to Boston to load up and drive them all the way up
I
here.
mean, I could just see him reading the newspaper and this thing flowing over.
Yeah, well, fortunately, that's why you don't read about that in the newspaper.
No.
Before we go any further, we do need to do department comments. Obviously, the Conservation Commission was notified as you read in the requirements. And Evie, would you like to deliver your comments here, or do you want us to read them from?
I'm here, I might as well read.
Thank you. Go ahead and come up. This is Evie Nathan, Chair of the Conservation Commission.
Okay, thank you. I'm Evie Nathan, Conservation Chair. These comments are sort of overarching comments. We haven't gone through the planning board process with you yet, but this is the comments that we came up with. In spite of our Aquifer Protection Ordinance, number 201, which specifically states that subsurface storage of petroleum and other refined petroleum products is a prohibited use of the land, this project received a variance from the ZBA. This makes it incumbent upon every town board to take responsibility for the protection of public health and general welfare of the citizens and the environment by careful monitoring of each step and every aspect of the project. Since there will be potentially significant environmental effects, a monitoring and reporting program for construction and for any changes made to the plans should be a prerequisite for the special exception. In addition, this project certainly has regional impact. Once the project is complete, the Conservation Commission would like to know who or what entity will be responsible for monitoring the site for environmental safety measures and ensure that they're being maintained in working order going forward. As we know, what's state-of-the-art today is obsolete in 25 years. It should be a condition of the project to mitigate or avoid any significant effects to the environment. And those are the comments of Kingston Conservation. I have one question, or are we not open for that yet?
Yeah, you can ask us as the
Okay,
public comment.
you mentioned that if there was a malfunction, you had contractors that you would call them. I can't get anybody to work on the siding on my house. Who are these highly skilled contractors? Where are they? And how quickly can they be here?
Well,
That's my question.
well, well, in particular, we contract with a company called Clean Harbors, and that's their entire function, is to mitigate oil spills at terminals, coastal waters, and also respond to emergency spills. They're located throughout New England. They have emergency pods and offices everywhere from Boston, Portsmouth, Burlington, Vermont. Trying to think where I have, but regionally located so that they can respond quickly.
So there's one in Portsmouth.
Correct.
Just, I know you used the term variance in there, you really meant special exception that was given in October of '21.
And it is prohibited now, it was prohibited then, but a special exception was allowed for gas stations, and that's how the special exception came about, so that it wasn't a variance that was given, contrary to the rules. It was, and that obviously has changed since then, but that was then. So yes, the issue of a response plan and quick response to spills and cutting off spills, this is all an issue that needs to be assessed by someone who has some
Chairman, my name's Chris Winiarski. I'm an attorney. Excuse me?
Yeah, I was gonna make a comment about keeping this short, but I think you have a fairly detailed communication that you sent to us, and so.
I did, and I'll go through it as quickly as I can while
Right,
covering
just
all the bases.
germane to the special exception tonight, because I know a lot of it was cut and pasted from the planning board comment sheet, and there's things that we can't address at the ZBA.
Sure, I understand. There's
Thank
also
you.
some clarifications that have to be made in response to some of the assertions made. So, as I was saying, my name's Chris Winiarski. I'm an attorney with Divine Millimet. I'm representing CW Station LLC, who's a direct abutter to the rear, the east, I believe. I'm sorry you had to endure sort of that long discussion about the prior special exception in the court proceeding, because the law is very clear that that's wholly irrelevant. In order for the applicant to have its rights under the prior zoning ordinance, which, as you said, was amended significantly on March 14th, it had to have a plan on file, and that had to be filed before the first public notice of the zoning ordinance amendment.
I gotta interrupt you for a minute there, because you're about to argue a case for the special exception for the aquifer protection zone, and whether that's valid, and that is not something that we can answer here. That would be something that the planning board, probably with the advice of the attorney, will make the decision about what relief needs to be granted prior to the hearing. And so we are going to tonight only review the special exception request for the commercial zone 2. We don't get to choose what is applied to us.
Sure, I can appreciate that, but there was about a 20-minute discussion about it, so I would appreciate if I could have about 60 seconds to put my position into the record. As I was saying, plain and simple, that plan had to be filed prior to the notice being given to the public of the zoning amendment, and it had to remain on file. That law is very, very clear. That's RSA 676:12. The applicant voluntarily withdrew its plan. It's that simple. And that's all I have to say on the matter, understanding that you are only addressing the single special exception that is before you.
Right.
However, in light of that, the applicant did state moments ago that these other uses are permitted by right. The restaurant, the drive-through, the third one, the convenience store.
Yeah, the drive-through, by the way, is an adjective, not a noun. So it's a drive-through window for a restaurant, or a drive-through
window.
Like a bank isn't permitted in that zone. So a bank that had a drive-through window, a teller window, the drive-through is not a unique business.
That's actually not true under your ordinance. Specifically,
You mentioned drive-through?
Those are not accessory uses under section 109.5D. Specifically, not accessory uses. So that is not
that
your ordinance.
particular, a drive-through what is not permitted?
It's considered a separate use. It's specifically considered not accessory.
It's listed as a separate use?
It's specifically not an accessory use that's in your ordinance. It's in my submission too. I've given you.
I read your submission. My point to you is, again, this is something that the planning board would take up, but saying that a bank has a drive-through window, therefore it's a separate use from the bank, would be a stretch. So I'm just pointing that out to you, that drive-through in this case is an adjective, not a noun.
Drive-through window then.
A drive-through window, yeah, for a restaurant, fast food, or for the gas station's a drive-through.
I don't think that's what your ordinance means, but it is of course up to the board to make that determination as to what drive-through means.
Different board, but you're right. Yeah.
No, it's this board. The zoning board makes that interpretation. That's the function of the zoning board. Interpretation of the ordinance.
But only if it is sent to us.
Excuse me?
Only if it's sent to us by another, we hear appeals. I'm just gonna leave it there, that we don't go looking for things that need to be done.
I understand. I'm addressing a direct statement made by the applicant which I think is not correct according to your ordinance. That's all I'm doing.
Okay. No.
So, a convenience store is not an allowed use in the Aquifer Protection District. That requires a conditional use permit that's pursuant to 201.4G.
But by the planning board.
Yes, that is
Yes,
a
that's
conditional
planning
use
board.
permit by the planning
So,
board.
that's not us.
Clarifying it's not a by right use, that's what was represented to this board. I'm giving you that clarification. That's my duty to do that. Similarly, restaurant, also not permitted in the Aquifer Protection District by right, as was represented by the applicant. That requires a conditional use permit. The drive-through window in the Commercial 2 District also requires a special exception from the planning board. Also requires a variance from the ZBA in the Aquifer Protection District. Subsurface storage of petroleum and other refined petroleum products in the Aquifer Protection District is prohibited. Variance is required under section 201.E.4 of the ordinance. The use or generation of hazardous materials greater than 25 gallons in the Aquifer Protection District is prohibited. It requires a variance under 201.E.18 of the ordinance. So I'm not saying this to say we should take those matters up. I'm saying this to clarify a misrepresentation or mistake that was made.
But while you're doing that, when you quote that, it says except for numbers 14 and 17 above, which 14 is a gas station. So you've got to read the entire thing. If you say it requires, you know, hazardous use, hazardous whatever, generator.
And the gas station is not a permitted use, right?
It's still listed as being except for a gas station, which is 14.
All right, okay.
Okay, so.
All right, so with all those things in mind and having that clarification made for the record, let's turn to the criteria. And again, you know, we have to remember that this is in an Aquifer Protection District. Regardless of what your interpretation is of whether or not a special exception is valid for that use, that's still the character of the area. That's still where this is located. So when we look at criteria 1, whether or not the property values or the essential character of the area are negatively impacted. You know, the residents of this town specifically disallowed those uses to protect the essential character of this area. If you look at my client's property, which is in this area, for example, that's a wholly natural farm. It's not hard to see how a gas station use is detrimental to that business. It's incompatible with the area. The two things don't go together. So the board has to follow the ordinance that it has, and it's going to have to make some sort of written finding as to why it's not seeing an impact of a gas station on the property values and the essential character of an area that has a wholly natural farm right next door. Second criteria, whether there are traffic or safety hazards. So I know that a town department requested a traffic study. I heard the applicant talk about a traffic study. There has been no traffic study submitted to this board. Your town planner, when I asked him, said he had no traffic study. So I'm not sure what the status is of that traffic study, but it would be fairly unreasonable for the board to not require that traffic study. It is a criteria of the special exception being sought. So you might want to consider that. Third question is whether or not there's an excess demand on municipal services. As you discussed, this is things like police, schools, fire, etc. Your ordinance in section 201.8E requires a fire department approved spill prevention and response plan. I listened to 10 to 20 minutes of discussion about it with this board, and I noted that the applicant's materials submitted for this said that we'll work on that. But that's not what your ordinance requires. Your ordinance specifically requires that that plan be submitted and approved by the fire department. So you can't really make that finding unless as a board you're going to go out and say, we're not concerned with the fire department, we're going to take that upon our own hands. And if I'm on the other side, I'm gonna say that that's unreasonable. It doesn't sound reasonable to me. The fourth criteria, that no hazard on account of a toxic materials release is likely to occur. As the applicant pointed out, they gave you a 2-page document, and they discussed it quite a bit, and the board had many questions. And as I think, Mr. Chairman, you pointed out, it would make good sense for the board to have a third-party consultant retained by the board representing its interest at the expense of the applicant to evaluate that. I think it would be reckless for the board not to do that. I've seen many other towns evaluate these types of applications, and I have not seen one that didn't require a third-party consultant who's a qualified expert in reviewing these things to review the entire application, quite frankly, because as the applicant stated, there is a lot of technical material here that is outside the expertise of any of the lawyers here and likely any of the board members. Understanding, I don't know all of your professional backgrounds, so maybe that's not true, but just the same, the prudent approach and the approach that probably best protects this board from any potential liability is to hire a qualified expert to do that at the applicant's expense. And then you have one fifth criteria that we haven't discussed. It's fairly administrative, but it's that notice be given to the planning board, to the Conservation Commission, and to the Board of Selectmen. That's a legal notice of this proceeding. This special exception application has to go to those 3 bodies. So any decision that finds that that criteria has been met has to include some evidence that that notice actually occurred. And again, I don't know if that occurred, and I expect that's an administrative function, but I point that out for clarity because it's something that can easily be overlooked. So when you look at all of these criteria, in light of what has been submitted to this board, not considering what may or may not have been submitted to some other board or some member at the town, the person who would receive those, again, told me he hasn't received anything. This board hasn't received anything that can be relied upon as evidence to find that any of these criteria have met. Quite the opposite. This board has received the applicant's opinion and nothing else. So for that reason, I don't think it's possible for you to issue a decision approving this special exception application that would withstand any sort of judicial scrutiny on a test of reasonableness. That's all I have to say, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board members may have.
Does anybody have a question on this? We're taking this on board, and we have discussed earlier, you mentioned that we talked about getting hydrology review, hydrological review. However, we'll get a review. That person would then make a determination of whether we need a hydrogeographic study, and that would be separate. That would be they often, a year and a half ago, they volunteered to do one, and that would get peer reviewed by a person, a professional hydrologist that would be a consultant to the board.
Yeah, it's very important that review happens for the ZBA.
And as you heard when I was reading the town engineer's comments, was that he is not qualified to do the analysis of the traffic study. That apparently he got it. I have not seen it either.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
The traffic study. The town engineer apparently, when he did his review, had received a copy of the traffic study, but he said he's not a traffic engineer, so that was going to go to someone else. And that is one of the criteria. You're right.
Right. So I mean,
and then an engineering review of some kind. So that would be one of the things the board's going to discuss once we get to that stage. But I think bringing those up.
These are the types of things that are specifically in the criteria. They have to happen. There's absolutely no way to say, well, we'll do it at a later date. You can't say that the criteria is met until it's actually met. You know, it's sort of like granting a special exception with the condition that you meet the criteria later. doesn't work that way. That's the gist of what I'm saying.
Certain conditions precedent, and so, all right, we have somebody else like to, any other questions?
Thank you.
Pick it up.
Hi, my name's Phil Coombs. I live at 6 Little River Road, and I'm the owner of CW Station LLC, the abutting property. First off, I'd like to thank this board for spending more than an hour and 7 minutes that the previous board gave this matter. I think it's highly egregious to cite that as any kind of review on the impact on the aquifer, what the farce that took place previously. I don't know if there was a free toaster oven or something that was at stake to get it done as quickly as possible, but hopefully that deal isn't going on tonight. As the attorney indicated, I followed up with the previous board, and nobody had the qualifications to render the decision that this was safe for the surrounding area. It was basically made on promises from the applicant, which I've met with the gentleman, seems like a nice guy, but at the end of the day, he's here to make money, and it's not to protect the water of our area. And for that reason, I have to point out some things that weren't brought up on the site orientation. So right here and right here are two streams. This stream runs right through my property, and that stream is fed by a spring up by the Carriage Town Plaza. Through the past 3 drought cycles we've had over the last 6 years, that stream continues to flow year-round. It feeds into the Little River. The other thing that wasn't mentioned is on the back third to half of this property, or this proposed location, there's a 25-foot drop-off, because this used to be a gravel pit. Now, I own these 4 ponds right here. Now, you may notice this is the low point of the property as it's adjacent to the river. Why would they just put ponds in there?
Could I just interrupt you for a second? Would you be kind enough to indicate how far away this is? Because it's hard to, when you're pointing like the Little River, how far do you think that is, or your property where you're pointing to the river?
So right here is indicated on the line, which you probably can't see from there, but that is the property line. By their indication, it's 1,465 feet. I would estimate that this is half that. I don't have a computer in front of me or a scale. One of my first jobs was working for my uncle doing hydroseeding in the early 90s. I was 14 years old, and I dragged the hydroseed hose along while he'd do reclamation work on gravel pits. If people remember, there used to be a lot more sand and gravel pits around in the area. And like anything, when the government doesn't like something, they regulate it out into oblivion. So that's what they started doing with gravel pits in 1989. One of the first things they did was start making groundwater requirements. You could only be a certain number of feet above the groundwater. And that got more and more stringent as the years went by. That's why you don't see many sand and gravel pits. One of the first answers to that was to go to the low point of the property and dig a pond. So when we had to hydroseed on these places, there was always a nice, deep, clean pond, because I was 14 and I'd just go swimming in there because it was July and it was hot. And I never really thought of it at the time. But the whole point of that was to bring the water table down so that the quarrying could continue to take place. So what that means is every bit of water uphill of here already has a predetermined channel down to that low point. So anything that happens up on this site is coming directly to my property. Now, I've put a lot of work into restoring these ponds, stocking them with fish, and we have plans for an aquaponics project in the future. So this is a direct part of my farm. That is my livelihood. And I am an ardent capitalist. I believe in everybody's right to earn until it infringes on my right to earn. And this is something that they cannot guarantee that this will not spill, create a problem. I keep hearing about the technology. Well, I can tell you some recent history. Although the gentleman says that he has 180 or 150 places that he has never had a spill on, the town of Kingston, every single gas station in the town of Kingston has been cited by the DES for a leaking tank. Every single one. Bayberry's, Crickles, the most recent was the Shell station in 2012. So there is a history in this town of leaking gas stations. The technology keeps getting brought up, and I'm reminded of Bill Gates saying, you know, in the late 90s, he said, if the car companies could just get on board with technology like us, we'd have cars that were $50 and could get 1,000 gallons per mile, or miles per gallon. A rep from GM was asked about this, and he said, yeah, but who wants to drive a car that crashes twice a day? Technology is great. It's a tool in the toolbox, but at the end of the day, we are taking a risk by putting a toxic substance. Yes, the MBTE may be gone, but there's still benzene in gasoline. Nobody in here is going to take a cup of benzene and drink it, or gasoline or diesel. That is not something we want in our water. And the fact of the matter is, there is a chance that this can get in here. We are the Saudi Arabia of water. We have more water reserves in this town than any other surrounding community in all of New England. To put this here would be reckless. There's a reason why 70% of the people in March supported removing gas stations from the Aquifer Protection District. As a politician, sometimes you don't get the opportunity to hear what the people think, but you now know what 70% of likely voters feel on the matter. They don't want this. They don't want to run this risk. And if the risk is not zero, then it's not a risk worth taking. A couple questions I have. What is the year storm level that this is built for? It is no secret that we are experiencing rains that are more intense, less frequent. So we are getting 25, 50-year storms every 5 to 6 years. The storms we're experiencing are a lot more intense. Is this being built for that? On the plans that I saw, there was no snow storage plan. That is something that is going to scrape up all this stuff that's spilled on the ground. Go where? Is it going to be treated? As far as the monitoring of levels of gas, I'm not a scientist, but gas expands and contracts with ambient temperature. And so to have a, on the money exact amount of what is in and out on a daily basis is not 100% accurate. There's a reason they put them under the ground, because they don't want to be subject to ambient temperature, because it makes it expand and contract and it makes it sweat. So the other thing is, with regard to detriment to property value, beyond the obvious of a spill affecting my livelihood, there is the hours. There is already a self-storage unit here that the town regulates have to have its lights off by 11 o'clock. If you drive by there at 2 in the morning, those lights will be on, and the town has done nothing about it. This gentleman also had a vernal pond on his property that the town was adamant to be protected, leaving trees around that. A bunch of those trees got cut, that vernal pond is gone. The town mandated 4 years ago that that gentleman was supposed to replant trees. That has not happened yet. The town does not have the capability to monitor a project like this effectively. So you can put all the rules and regulations and conditions on there, but unless they're going to be followed, they're as worthless as those trees that aren't there anymore. This is just too much of a risk for our town. There is too much to be lost for the pennies that we could gain. Thank you.
Would you like to come up and sit here?
Good evening. My name is Doug Finnan, Brentwood Planning Board and Economic Development Committee. Appreciate you allowing us to come.
Can you get the name? Can you say the name?
Doug Finnan, F-I-N-A-N, Brentwood Planning Board and Economic Development Committee. I concur with Phil. I happen to know him very well as well. And I'm just here in observance pretty much, but a couple of comments I did want to make, provided the board will allow me. With our ZBA, normally there's a hardship that's involved in order to come to the ZBA to at least ask for special exceptions. Whether this does or doesn't fit that criteria, I don't know. The only hardship I do see is the fact that there's an aquifer there. And if there's a leakage where there is not 100% guarantee, then the hardship will be with the residents of this town and other towns around it. If you're inclined to have a third party take a look at this, Dana Thurlow, she does an excellent job. She's independent, and she gives a direct analysis on everything that you may want to know. It was made mentioned that this has already been approved. I'm a little confused as to the special exceptions, whether or not
This
they
is
are.
a special exception for commercial zone 2. Gas stations are only permitted in commercial zone 3, which is in the southern part of 25. So what was previously approved was a special exception for the aquifer protection zone.
Okay.
And this one does have a requirement that we evaluate it for a harm to the environment. So yeah, there's a little bit of overlap there, but that's why.
Okay. And the applicant also indicated that the new technology, everything being double-walled for the firewall and everything like that, I just would mention everything that's new becomes old, and this is all man-made and put together, and just like everything else, it has a life. And at the end of that life, we don't know what potential we have to have leakage going into that aquifer. That's pretty much all I want to say.
Before you go, you mentioned someone who'd done a review.
Dana Thurlow. I'm on the planning board, so we utilize her for water reviews and
right,
things.
Dana Trust.
I'm sorry? Trustlow?
Trustlow, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about the same person.
Yeah, same person.
Yeah, and the Kingston Planning Board is...
Yeah, usually it's the planning board that does that.
Also, in fact, she'll be here next week.
Okay.
Thank you, yeah, I just didn't want to know if there was another study that had already been
No.
done. That we could kind of...
I mispronounced her name, sorry.
It's all right,
Thank you very much.
I blanked out on it.
I can't follow these guys. I'm Steve Kent, 9 Bluebird Lane, Kingston. Everybody keeps pointing to it, but it's the last piece of property on Bluebird Lane.
Did you get spelling the last name? Okay.
I have a problem with them changing the entrance to this gas station and moving a rumble strip a good 20 feet closer to my house. That is going to have a noise impact on my property, if you look at their drawings. I also have a problem with increased lighting. With the increased lighting that's going to be created around this gas station to my house. You all don't understand how close that property is going to be to residential. I also have a problem with, they keep saying the property value, it won't increase or decrease the property value. Well, if there is a leak, my property value is null and void. It's going to impact it regardless. I've got a beautiful set of woods behind me with water. You guys, with a simple push of the pen, can take that all away if there is a leak. They won't live there. They don't live anywhere near it, so it won't impact them at all. It's just going to impact me and the rest of the town. I don't think it's necessary for them to make a profit on our property values. What about all the leakage during construction, that the potential is there? What happens then? We don't have all the, you certainly don't have all of the containment during construction. I was a builder for 35 years, and I know how much leakage can happen with some old vehicles, with some heavy equipment, with all of that. Filling
what leakage you're talking about wouldn't be the tank leakage until...
Say it louder, please.
What's that? Oh, sorry, I was wondering what kind of leakage you were talking about Fuel and oil from the construction equipment?
Fuel loss from the, refueling the construction equipment, there's no safety on that at all.
Yeah, there's usually, and there again, this is planning board stuff, but they usually have requirements, and I know the town
There
engineer.
is no safety on that at all. I can tell you from first-hand experience, when you fill up a loader on site, there is no safety for that. The truck comes in, puts his hose to it, and fills it up. If there's any spillage or anything else, that's on top of the soil before all the separators get put in.
Okay. All right, anything else?
Clean Harbor, I've been dealing with them since December. They said that they use Clean Harbor and they're great. I had a transformer come down, and it's taken till just last week for them to finally clean up the area. From one transformer that didn't have PCBs in it, it only had mineral oil. However, mineral oil is oil-based product, and it took them that long to dig out my property, and we put down topsoil again to cut out the hot top because the oil got in there, and we put down the hot top again. There is no guarantees, people. If you put a gas station up there, that's just going to be 100 times more than my little friggin' piece of property that I have there. But you do this, how are you going to guarantee my property value won't diminish or go down? How are you going to guarantee to me, as a citizen of this town, that the extra lighting and the extra noise and the trucks going in and out of that place at 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, on my streets, my property? If you can't guarantee me, then we really shouldn't be giving them the permit to build. I just paid my taxes today in this town. They don't. They're only here to make money. I have nothing against people making money, but they're here to make money. I'm here to live. I moved to this town 4 years ago because it was a nice part of town, and I wish you wouldn't take it away.
In all fairness, the property owner does pay taxes.
Pardon me?
In all fairness to the applicant, the property owner does pay taxes, and
I can't hear you.
the property owner does pay taxes on that land also, but the,
As used, or it's in use, he's not really paying anything on it right now.
well, if it was developed, there would be a significant property tax. But I understand your point. You're an existing resident.
So what he pays in property tax if he ruins my property is okay. That's what you just said?
No, I said that, in fairness, they are also, you said that they don't pay property taxes.
Right now, they don't. They pay an in-use tax, which is,
if they own the property, it's somebody that they're representing now owns the property. I think it's, what is it? Kingston Crossing, thank you, maybe, owns the property, but, you're right, it's based on the use.
right.
And the assessed value, obviously the assessed value would be significantly higher if this was built, but,
Substantially not high enough should there be an accident.
right, well, that's part of, I guess.
You're
part
going
of-
to lose the farm and my property if there's an accident. Is it really worth that, to have a gas station there? Is it that necessary to put a gas station there? I couldn't get a driveway put off of that road because the state didn't want to slow down traffic originally when they widened 125. They wanted a flow from the lights, Exeter Road, through. So we weren't allowed to put in an off-ramp driveway, anything off of 125, because it would have slowed down traffic and caused the trucks to have to start and restart. Now you're gonna put in a gas station where trucks are gonna be starting, restarting all night long. You don't live next to a Jake brake farm, but I will be if you put that in.
Yeah,
You don't live next to a diesel out of a gas station at 2 o'clock in the morning and turning left and going right by my house, but I will be. So I'd like you to consider the citizens of this town as much as you're considering owners who admitted that he's built 40 or 50 of them across the country. So this is just gonna be another small town where they put their stamp on it.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Thank you for your time.
Pardon me, I am stiff because we've been sitting a long time. I'm Virginia Morris. I live at 188 Main Street here in Kingston. I want to talk a little bit, some specifics about water and how the water moves in this town. I agree with Phil Coombs that there are some natural drainages on our properties as the property goes up and down. The way gravel pits, which I inspected for many years when I was on the Conservation Commission, the way they impact the land. Since there does not or has not been shown yet any plan for snow storage, we must remember that that is salt-laden water, and it needs to go somewhere. Generally, lot coverage is a planning board, oh, that's nice, thank you, planning board issue. But I'd just like to remind the ZBA for caution here, because we're talking about impact to the land around this site. In this area, the lot coverage for impactable material can be no more than 35% for recharge. Remember, a retention pond is not a recharge area. Specifically, it serves the purpose to contain, not recharge, the surface water. Therefore, you need to check carefully, and I haven't looked at the percentages and specifics there, but you need to check carefully that any retention ponds are not considered non-permeable areas. To check carefully for the 35% lot coverage requirement for recharge. That also should show the pattern and the plan for where that salt water snow storage will go that will not damage the water in the aquifer protection zone. Thank you.
Actually, I would like to address that question probably to you, as far as you talked about the fire ponds being lined, so if they had a spillage, they would not leach into the ground. Large rain event or flood event or something like that, large spillage that got into the fire ponds. So, and you're in aquifer protection zone E, and which I believe is Virginia said that's 35%, but increased up to 60% with recharge systems or infiltration systems in place. So, you want to address that as far as?
Yeah. So a couple things. We do show snow storage areas on the plan. They live along these two curb lines, so it is on the plans. And as I mentioned earlier, there's 4 different ponds proposed for the project. 2 of them are bioretention ponds with liners that do not infiltrate to the groundwater. But because of the requirement to recharge the groundwater, there's 2 additional ponds that do recharge to meet your regulations. So all those calculations are in the stormwater report that has been filed with the plan. So that'll all be vetted out with the town peer reviewer, getting into those details.
Right. Yeah, and that's not one of the criteria that we're doing here. That obviously wouldn't happen. But I did want to address that question as it came up here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That is incorporated in the plan board. So.
All right. Yes, come on up.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn McGoy, and I live at 17 Castle Court here in Kingston.
Okay, just a sec. Did you get the?
Last name again, please?
Oh boy, L-A-V as in Victor, O-I-E.
Okay.
So I have a few concerns that I heard very superficially addressed around this project, so I'd just like to bring them up. There was a mention of the traffic light at the intersection of 107 and 125, which I understand would be the responsibility, should be approved, of the distribution center from up the road. That part of what they had agreed to was to put in that traffic light. So if the distribution center is not approved, would there be a traffic light at that intersection, and how would the improvements to that intersection be required to be made for this project?
Well, this is something that's we've dealt with by the state DOT and the traffic study and they call it mitigation. If for some reason the distribution facility did not go in, the state, I'm sure, required the traffic light would end up being in the responsibility of this applicant. And as you said, the traffic light right now is the responsibility of the of that project 266. But the widening of the lanes, turn lanes, would be the responsibility of the applicant here. So that is beyond our control, and to give you some idea of how long it takes, it's been, I think, 2 years at least for 266, and they're not expecting any any decision from the state before the end of the year, last week.
So, along with environmental concerns, of course, I understand the concerns around the aquifer, but there are other types of environmental concerns that I have. One is I haven't heard what the operating hours of this facility would be. What time would they open? What time would they close? Would that be regulated, or?
That would be part of the planning board review process, because it's not one of the criteria that we're evaluating tonight. Obviously, that does have an impact.
So, is light pollution, noise pollution, air quality, are those the things that are part of this board's considerations?
Yes. Well, actually, light pollution, I'm not sure if that's one of the listed ones. They do talk about
Noise, glare.
noise. Okay, yeah, glare. Let's see, where was that one? Okay, the amount of smoke, gas, dust, pollutant, noise, glare, heat, vibration. So, yes, that would have to be something they demonstrate.
So, would trucks that hypothetically came from the distribution center be able to fuel at this gas station and line up waiting to fuel? I understand there are 3 bays for diesel.
Well, yeah, he described it as 3 fueling stations for 2 trucks, because they have tanks on both sides. So I really don't.
So what if there are 10 trucks that want to fuel? Can they all just idle there?
This is something that I'm sure they have done studies and
well, those are the questions that I have, the concerns that I have that I haven't heard addressed. So
obviously, if this is an issue as part of this traffic study and backing things up with lights and people making, you know, all these left turn lanes, whether they're long enough and things like that, is all part of the DOT's review.
Okay, but the air quality with idling trucks is I would think, an environmental concern.
Idling trucks.
Okay, well, you know, as I said, I just want to bring up these issues, these questions that I had regarding, as I said, you know, operating hours and pollution, regarding light, noise, and air quality. So, thank you for your time.
Hi there, I'm Pam Brown, 23 Sunshine Drive in Kingston. I didn't expect to speak tonight, but I thought I would for several people who couldn't be here tonight. While we're supportive of economic development in Kingston, my neighbors are definitely opposed to a gas station being added to Kingston, given the value of our aquifer. It's very valuable to all of us, and we're very concerned about just another gas station. We have plenty of gas stations in the area along 125 and 111, and with the emergence of EVs, I'm wondering, do we really need another gas station? You know, the restaurant sounds great. Maybe add a bowling alley or something to that. That would be wonderful. But the gas station is definitely something that my neighbors, when I mention it to them, are strongly opposed to. I haven't met one person that said, gee, yes, let's get another gas station along 125. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. How would you like to...
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and I'm sure you're good friends, but he's about to vote on this issue.
Yeah, you need to be back in.
I'm here because I can't hear you.
No, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying the appearance doesn't look good. No problem. I understand where you're coming from. You know, I mean, the image is not good.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, come on up and you can address the comments that were made, answer questions.
I'll be brief. I know everyone's been here for a while. It's warm. Just briefly, RSA 67612 doesn't apply here. That pertains to building permits, and I agree with you, Chairman, that the issue before this board tonight is the special exception under the Article 109. That requirement, that ordinance does not require a traffic study. It says that there should be an adverse impact on traffic, but a traffic study isn't required. Regardless, we've submitted an expert here with tonight who has testified that this is not going to have an adverse impact on traffic. As to a hydrogeological study, again, that's not required under this special exception criteria. It was an option that the board could have considered with respect to the special exception criteria with the aquifer protection ordinance. The board decided that if the planning board wants to hire a hydrologist to go through and analyze that, the planning board may be better suited to analyze that data. Finally, obviously, there's no hardship standard here. This isn't a variance, it's a special exception. Moving forward, with regard to noise, light pollution, and the like, which a lot of the last couple comments have focused on, it's important to remember that those types of considerations have to be considered in light of the use that we're talking about and in light of this particular ordinance, which as a permitted use allows manufacturing, recreational facilities, distribution plants, truck terminals, office parks, supermarkets, grocery stores, retail stores, agriculture, food trucks. And so when we're talking about light and noise and those types of supposed nuances, we have to remember this is already a commercial zone. And the only thing that requires a special exception in this case is the gas station component of this project. The restaurant's permitted by right, and the retail operation is permitted by right in this zone. And finally, I would remind the board that this board has already determined that this project will not have an adverse effect on the aquifer, subject to planning board approval as well, and that the Superior Court has already upheld that decision of this board. With that,
okay, I will point out that we do have both a lighting ordinance and a noise ordinance that would have to be complied with. So, and the noise ordinance does change with the time of day, so that and it's relevant to the use of the abutter, not the zone of the abutter.
I think it's important to remember that this is a commercial zone and that there are things that are permitted on this zone, such as grocery stores, that would have light pollution, for example.
Right, well, presumably not
within the confines of the ordinance.
Ordinance, lighting ordinance, yeah.
Yeah, which we fully intend to abide by.
Right,
We haven't submitted a variance to seek an exception from the noise ordinance. We haven't file the variance and seek an exception from any light ordinance.
So the issue now is the board can decide on what professional analysis we want to have, if we want that, or if you feel you have enough information to vote, you can go through the criteria, and I guess this is the point where we close the public hearing portion to deliberate. Actually, no, we don't. Hang on a second. Go ahead.
You're still taking public comment?
Yeah, well, go ahead. We haven't closed the hearing. I mean, we haven't closed the public comment section, so.
Muriel Ingalls, 100 Main Street, Kingston. I'm not an abutter, but I am a loyal Kingston resident, and I feel that this board is listening to exceptions, that will make this work, but I hear no concrete evidence. I only hear opinions. I am very concerned about traveling up Church Street and going on to 125. The number of accidents that have occurred in that location over the years is enormous. That's an important point, and I hear no evidence of a traffic study or any concerns about traffic safety. And the impact on 125 in that area is going to be huge. I have a very good visual learning strategy, and I can see what they're proposing. And I think it is an insult to the character of Kingston. And I think this board ought to be thoughtful about the risk they are willing to take and tell me what good is this activity going to do for Kingston residents? What good is it going to bring to the town of Kingston? I see no good. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mira.
That closes.
What's that?
That closes the public. You might want to close the public.
Yeah, okay, okay, that's the last of the public comment section. And I guess I'm gonna ask for, same as we did before, what opinions from the board members as to how we want to proceed. Bearing in mind that we need to collect facts and have this analyzed in order to make a decision, as opposed to passing the buck down the road and help the planning board to take care of it. Having said that, the applicant is only obligated to pay for one analysis that would serve both the ZBA and the planning board, so that if we set up an escrow account to have not a hydrogeologic study, but a hydrologist analyze it as recommended by our town engineer, to review the information that's been provided, to analyze how much lateral drift there is in the aquifer, and how this could affect abutter properties and public property, as it states in the description here. An engineering review would be limited and to answer the questions in the essentially 4 criteria that we're going to be talking about tonight. And also there's an engineering review that has been done for the planning board, but that's specific to planning process.
If the town engineer recommends it, I was paying the town engineer research.
Well, I mean, I'm the feeling that if we're gonna, you know, that if we're gonna do this properly, we need to take, and the information that's been provided to us by the applicant, and it's their obligation to provide enough information to make a decision. Unfortunately, we aren't necessarily qualified to decide whether there is going to be a hazard, and that's why we do have professional consultants, and that's why the state gives us that authority to have independent verification or analysis of the information that's been provided to us. So I had not thought about this before, and it came up in comments that we have used other third-party consultants for traffic study analysis, and as I said, the traffic study is in number 2 item, no creation of traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't think this will have an impact on traffic, but that is something that even our town engineer says he's not qualified to analyze. And I'm not qualified to analyze that. But if we have a third-party consultant do and analyze the traffic study that has been prepared and has been given to the town, that would be available to both the planning board and to us if it goes to the planning board. So that would be a third study. So an engineering study, a hydrology review, and potentially a consultant for a traffic study would be the 3 things that we need to discuss and determine whether we want to request it. Yes,
you say that these will be conditional items that we put into the approval or just
I think what would happen is that if you had a professional review, it would say that they would make a recommendation about something that could be turned into a condition of approval if we decide to do that. And so they could say, well, yes, you need. I don't think the traffic study is a good example because that's so.
I mean, that's probably the easiest one to kind of digest, right? Where we say, okay, you need to go through a conditional approval, or you need to have this condition met for traffic study, and it has to be kind of understood. You know, if it doesn't meet or if it exceeds what we determine is reasonable, then this is null and void, right?
Yeah, it would have to meet the condition, but the flip side is that instead of doing conditional approval, they could get the analysis of the traffic study, come back and say that the mitigation factors that are being proposed are fine, and that we wouldn't have to put a condition on that, and then the state would just take care of mitigating that. The danger of runoff going into the farms or the pools and things like that, that would have to be a study that a hydrologist would do and could recommend it. Well, additional berming, like the engineer's report recommends to the planning board that additional berming be put in to satisfy certain requirements. And so all those could be conditions to be put in as if the reviewing engineer says that this could be done safely if, and then those ifs could be turned into conditions. And you could do a conditional approval. The idea, and the same was true the last time, is that we're not saying that you can go ahead and build it. We're saying that if you meet these conditions, or if you if you can prove that it's safe, then you have a chance to take that to the planning board, and if they put restrictions on it that we haven't, it may be that it exceeds the cost benefit of the
Yeah, but
project.
that's determined
And that's
by the
what
planning
the applicant would determine, is, yeah, okay, we can make this 100% safe. The recommendations that have been made have affected the bottom line enough that it's not a viable solution. We wouldn't be making that. We just make a statement saying that in order to make this safe and meet these criteria, you'd have to meet conditions that have been recommended by our experts.
Yeah, and I kind of agree. I think for what you take into account, that these things should be met prior to.
And he said that there would have to be a fire plan, and there is another company that does fire suppression analysis for town.
Yeah, I think we're gonna go through that with the planning board anyways, because there's probably gonna be some specific fire suppression systems.
Yes, and it does say prior to approval, and they're talking about approval of the whole project. And so that there are some things that we could say that we could put as conditions that the fire suppression plan and whatever has been suggested here, you know, that be completed prior to approval of the project. You know, would be a condition precedent.
Yeah, which then could then be part of the whole
Planning board process, yeah, we could say that.
That could be part of the planning board approval, that there has to be a fire suppression plan in the planning boards.
Right, it's been approved by the fire department. That's the type of thing we could work on, but I think we need some basic analysis done.
Specifically the engineering and the hydraulic study.
Yeah, the engineering, hydrology, and I've got to say the traffic study too. I mean, that's the analysis of the traffic studies. Again, that's the type of thing that they're going to pay for it either way. If they go to, if we say that it's a requirement that be analyzed, doesn't matter if it's done before we have it here, or if we approve it with the condition that the traffic study.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah, it's been met, it goes there, then the planning board's gonna use the same traffic study analysis. It was on Zoom the last time we did one, and I don't remember the company, but that's all stuff we can work out. But I guess what we need is to know whether we're going to go through these criteria now.
Just a couple questions, because I just want to clarify here. I thought I heard that the state has already given their blessing on the traffic. Right?
No.
The state has not done an analysis of the traffic.
I'm sorry, we can't hear your question.
This is your question. Has the state done an analysis of the traffic already? And I thought they had, and I thought they were okay with it. So I think we may not have to do that one.
The Bureau of Traffic and the district office and the NHDOT highway design have all submitted comments on the project.
Comments, yeah.
Comments, so they've reviewed the information.
They would have to wait till the project got through the planning stage before they even start on it, and that's what happened with 366. They still haven't issued a.
Yeah, it takes a while to get, when you have off-site improvements like this project is proposing, it's gonna take quite some time to get a driveway permit. Doesn't mean it's not gonna happen, it just takes some time because they won't issue the driveway permit until the plans are approved. And at this point in time, we are just conceptually through NHDOT.
Right.
They are conceptually okay with the off-site improvements. They are okay with our traffic volumes. They are okay with the analysis and have said, move forward in this fashion with your design plans so that those can go through review so that a driveway permit can be issued.
I just don't want to spend money, anybody's money,
I understand,
if the state is going to give their blessing.
But same thing with 266, they had to do the traffic, they had the traffic study that was done, which they had done, and it had to be reviewed by one of our consultants, it is something that you need to decide whether you're comfortable with saying that that traffic study review has to be done I don't know how to word that.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that 125 in that area is limited use, am I correct? Limited use goes all the way from the fairgrounds up to the dump, the old dump, right? Limited access. So they're gonna look very closely at that. I'm just saying, I don't know how much redundancy we wanna do here. And is it even redundant? I don't know.
Well,
that's why I'm asking the questions.
I mean, obviously with the state, they have to do it anyway. So
that's what I'm saying. So why are we?
Well, because it's specifically addressed.
The state is not a third party.
No, I understand that. I understand it. Just
They're not going to do the review for us.
What I'm saying is they're not going to let something go in there that's going to be hazardous or detrimental. That's what I'm saying. So do we need to review? Do we need our reviewer to do something that we know the state's never going to allow? They're not going to allow that to be a hazard. I mean, maybe we do. I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
I will tell you at the planning level that is a requirement.
Okay, well, that's fine.
But it's also, yeah, right. So it is a requirement here. As Phil says, there is a third-party review of all these studies, and as I said, the state's not the third-party review.
And that's fine.
The question is whether there's number 2 here, no creation of traffic safety hazard, there's a substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. Can we decide that without having seen the study?
So that's number 1. Now, the next question is a cousin to this one. Now, that's the fire suppression brought up. We have a fire department that's going to go down there, and they're not going to let a substandard or a system that's not going to, do the job to be installed. Again, is it redundant? The question is, do we need to do that? Or is it going to be a redundancy? Are we going to require a study when we know darn well the fire department's not going to let something go in that is substandard? And it's a question. Maybe we do, and that's okay too. Whatever this board's going to decide is fine.
Yeah, and that's part of our ordinance requirements that be completed before approval. So, in this case, it's excess demand on municipal services. So, that doesn't state that we have to have a fire plan approved. I would say that goes into the planning board process.
That's all. Again, these are kind of academic questions. I just want to make sure when I make a decision that we're not causing undue requirements.
And quite frankly, since we're discussing this, this is the deliberation section of this. The word no excess demand on municipal services. Now, everything that you build is going to have demand, but that's what property taxes are for. Is to pay for those additional services. So the question is whether somebody has a project that would be considered a nuisance that would create an abnormally high police demand.
No, I get it.
That would be the type of thing.
I'm just asking questions.
Yeah.
Last question, and because I was a bit confused with what you said. I've only known you 40 years. Are we talking about runoff water here, or are we talking about subsurface water? Because you're talking about the hydrologist. I just want to, okay, that's fine. That is the question. Okay.
So, get back to the traffic study though. I mean, everybody knows that there'd be an improvement if there was a light.
Well, we don't know that. Right now, it's I've
been here 40 years too. I've seen so many accidents there.
Well, we had the jump handle, and they took that out, and it's right now it's a fairly fast moving, but it has a left turn lane for people going on to 107.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be an improvement in the lane there. Plus, there would be a light
I was gonna say, is there a set of lights going there?
Yeah,
That is a-
that their plan shows that as being, one of the mitigations that the 266 project is required to put the light in, they have to put the lanes in, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus the DOT has gotta make that decision whether there's actually a light there in a driveway.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So they have to have some sort of information from the applicant to say, hey, this is what's gonna happen.
Yeah, the driveway location is the state, and whether or not you can put one there is all dependent on the state. And I don't know what their requirements were on that section of the road, because
Unless it's changed since I've been here, I mean, they dictate whatever's going on.
oh, yeah, but I mean, it's as far as restricted access, I mean, farther down 125, it's restricted access. So they put in a parallel access road to mitigate the cutting through the limited access they put in south of there on 125. But, you know, that's entirely up to the state. This town, by the way, does require driveway permits on state roads, the town, because the state only goes as far as their end of their right of way. They determine where that driveway permit's gonna go, I mean, that driveway's gonna go, but once you have a driveway, it's, and the state has reaffirmed this, the town has responsibility for making sure it meets fire access, requirements and things like that, and setbacks from the side property lines. I noticed this one was only 10 feet, where 20 feet is required, so, but that is all part of the planning process, so.
It strikes me that probably more information is always better than less.
Right. Do we want to go through this criteria and see where we want more information and whether or more analysis done, and or do you want to, how do you want to do it? I'm open to suggestions here.
Peter, can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think our #1 priority should be protecting the aquifer. I think the hydrolysis study is very important. If we're going to allocate any resources, it should be to that first.
Yeah, it's not an either-or situation. We can require whatever studies,
yes,
analyses that we need in order to reach a decision based on facts.
Yes.
And right now, we only have really one side.
I'm also hearing that the Department of Transportation can handle the traffic questions of whether or not it causes congestion, and how the fire department can handle the fire suppression question.
Right.
And
because they're criteria,
I'm sorry.
because they're criteria here, we can add them as conditions.
I just think the
without
aquifer is
requiring
very
additional
important.
studies, right?
That's all I want to say.
And we can put the traffic study as a condition.
I'm gonna make a motion, so then we can discuss the motion.
Okay.
I don't wanna discuss it. We always do that, we discuss the motion before the motion, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm gonna be, okay, I'm gonna tell you why I did the motion after I do that. Not even taking my own advice. So I'm gonna make a motion that we do the hydrology study.
Okay. There are different levels of that. So, Dana has suggested, based on Dennis's, the engineer's comments, that she could do a review.
Yes.
Of the proposal, which would not cost an arm and a leg.
I'm sorry, I thought that's what I thought my motion
Right.
was. I'm not talking about drilling wells and stuff.
But what was talked about earlier and the last time was whether or not a hydrogeologic study, and that would not be Dana. She would review their hydrogeology, they would have that done. But we don't have enough information now to say that's going to be required.
No, I think she should review it. That's
Should
my
review
motion.
it.
She should review it.
See if she can come up with a recommendation.
Right.
And then
Give
we
us
can
that
decide what we want to do with that information.
Can you explain what is involved in an additional hydrogeological study versus your review plans?
Her reviewing, actually, I think one of you guys can answer that question better than I can, because I'm sure you're much more familiar with hydrogeologic surveys.
Yeah, I'm not clear on what the board's asking. So are you asking for a third-party review?
She's asking what the difference is between having a hydrologist
So a review of the hydrology of the drainage calculations that we did.
Right,
Drainage calculations, surface runoff, surface flows, impact on ponds, surface flows, those kinds of things.
Right.
Hydrogeologic is underground, that's aquifer flow, ground contour lines, it's a totally different field.
Right.
So I think the board wants a third-party review of the drainage calculations, which is a hydrological review that we prepared for the planning board already.
Okay, yeah, and then I think if she decides that there's going to need to be a hydrogeologic review, which is something that last time when we did the aquifer protection thing, we had mentioned that was a likely occurrence. That ZBA was not going to do that and have it do the analysis at that stage, but we felt it was likely that the planning board was going to require that because.
And you've already made that condition on the last special.
We did make that condition.
So that's already there. I think this time we're talking about the surface runoff, the discussions we've had about potential spillage on site.
Flow down into the farm.
Flow down to the farm. Those type of surface drainage issues, I think is what we're discussing.
So she's the expert. She said she'd do a review and not require, and she would make a recommendation to this board about whether further review is required. But I think we can get that done, and that would be probably less than $3,000 for that review.
I think it's simple if you say a review of the drainage calculations, because that's, everybody understands what that means.
Right. I will let her decide, because she's going to make a review of the proposal. One of the things she may recommend is that the hydrogeologic study be done, and then this board would have to decide whether, we might make that a condition of approval that be done, but that we wouldn't be the ones to analyze it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, Matt, it's the first condition you already.
And then you can set your hydrologist on doing that hydrologic study, be reviewed, but you would be moving in the right direction downstream, so to speak. But knowing that if something is discovered in that the condition may not be able to be met. Anyways,
so I'm a little confused.
Okay, so what we're talking about now is hydrology review by Dana Cheslow. There's a hydrogeology.
Get that.
Okay.
But the previous approval was based on hydro.
No, it was not based. We had the option of requiring that, and they offered to do the hydrogeologic study, which is something that they would do, that our engineers would do, and it would be reviewed, peer reviewed by our hydrogeologists, geologists, whatever.
So are they going to do that, or are they not?
Well, that's what most.
That's going to be based on what this review shows, and how we decide, what action we decide to take with that. And but in addition,
there was a condition on the previous approval.
If you like, I could read it. If you like,
the condition was a general condition that we did not require it then, but we said that the planning board could take whatever actions.
We tell the planning board.
Just a point of order, if I may. Yeah. Could we have a second and then discuss this?
Oh, okay. So you want to do this first, so as just a
well, because I don't think we can have three things in one motion.
No, you're right. So go ahead.
So my motion is to have her review
this plan.
Yes.
Hydrology.
review, okay.
Do we have a second, is the question?
I'll second it to keep things going.
No.
Okay, now we can go on to the discussion of what is involved. And this is where I leave it to the expert, which is Dan, to determine.
I agree with that, but
Okay.
I'm trying to understand what was previously. Or what
Previously,
condition-
we did not specify that there needed to be hydrogeological review. We specifically stated that the criteria that we're using, there's, for a development of houses, for example, requires, if you have over a certain number of toilets, essentially, you know, the septic flows beyond a certain amount, that would require a hydrogeologic study. Or there are other conditions that could require it. It gave the ZBA the option of requiring it in order to approve a fueling station. We did not at that time require it because we felt that the planning board was in a better position to require that, and we basically made the recommendation that they could put conditions on as they saw fit to protect the aquifer protection, the aquifer zone. We didn't say that the plans as submitted would protect the aquifer protection zone. We said that they could put any conditions they wanted that would be needed to protect the aquifer protection zone. So there's a little bit of difference in wording. What the attorney read here was not from the notice of decision. It was one of the criteria that it was that the ZBA felt
So
the
hypothetically,
project could go forward to the planning board.
we do the review with Dana. Dana says, yeah, we should look at a hydraulic study. Then that could be requested from the planning board.
That could be, we could require that, but,
It strikes me that if we're going to make a decision, we ought to have the hydrological study done, or have her review their work, and if she recommends a hydrological study be done, then that should be done next. If she recommends that, and let's try to keep this simple.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're over-engineering the camel.
Really,
yeah, we're not gonna say right now that because we don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
That you have to go and do a hydrogeologic study. Right. So we're gonna say, we're gonna have hydrogeologist make the decision about that and a recommendation to us. She says, oh yeah, then they would have to have had one done anyway.
No, if I may.
That's later.
Because you're confusing me now.
Okay.
Based on what Dana says, we will make other decisions.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
We're engineering a zebra and a camel and a racehorse here. I think, let's see what she says, and then we'll move on.
This is beneficial to the applicant and to us, unless they feel that might be too slow a project, and they can go ahead and do it on their own. But they would be wise to wait to get the recommendations. All right, so there's a motion and a second to require a review by a hydrogeologist and to establish an escrow account in the amount of $300,000.
I would like to speak to my motion.
Okay.
I think everyone here will agree that the overriding concern is the water. So let's see if we can get the answers to at least allay some of the concerns. And that's what I'm looking for, all right? This is very emotional. See if we can get the expert in here, maybe give some recommendations, some suggestions, or say, everything's fine. We don't know what the person might say, but at least we'll have more information to make a more informed decision. And that's all I'm looking for.
Right. Concur with that.
You don't mind.
So, but what I want to do is, as part of this motion, is that we would have to establish, call it Summit, establish an escrow account.
But that again is two things in one motion, so
Yeah,
I would suggest we vote on this and then set up the.
Oh, okay, and we can also do a single engineering
review account for any other.
Sure.
So that's fine.
You
All
could,
right.
you could do it in one motion, that's all.
I mean, we did it in one motion at the last meeting.
We did,
Oh,
and
we
that
just, well, okay, if that's how you work here, fine.
but I'm a little concerned if we set up 3 accounts or something like that, where we can just get one engineering review.
All right, so go through the motions of what we want done and then set up.
And then we'll set up the
account,
Yeah,
whatever
let's
we
find
feel
out.
That's
makes
what
more
I was
sense
kind
for
of
this
getting at.
application.
Okay, so we're gonna request an engineering review from hydrogeologist. That's the motion. Okay. And we have a second, I second. It's been so long, I forgot. Okay, so.
Any more discussion?
Any other discussion? Thank you. Man's used to meetings here. All right, then I'll put it to vote. All those in favor, say aye, and raise your hand so we can count. Aye, okay, and that's all voting members, it's unanimous.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to set up one account. Okay, I hope I'm wording it right. It's going through my brain here for any and all costs incurred with, not reviews, yeah.
Review, engineering?
Engineering, that's the word I'm looking for.
Hydrology reviews?
No, engineering reviews of various, required by the ZBA.
Or reviews?
Because we may have the fire, we may have suppression, we may have, so let's get one account set up, and anything we decide has to be an engineering review, will go into that one account, that's what I'm looking
We want to decide what things. we would
Instead
like
of
to
3,
see
or
before we
account for everyone.
decide.
Yeah, because we would probably want to put a dollar value on it, so why don't we get a second, another
We
motion?
won't know the dollar amount until, well, okay.
Do you have
I
that?
think we have to decide whether you want other reviews before we come up with a dollar amount.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that's what we should decide on the reviews we're gonna ask for, and then.
Okay, so I'll withdraw my motion until after we discuss the other things.
Okay, so, the other 2 we've discussed are engineering reviews, limited to.
Traffic and fire.
Well, no, there's a traffic, that would be a separate person, because Dennis can't do the traffic study, he's already stated that he's not a traffic engineer, he can't do that, so we have a person, I don't know who it is, but we can find that, I mean, we don't have to name the person, but, as far as an engineering review as to I think hazard, and this might be SFC, who does the fire reviews. Hazard to the public, kind of fire, explosion, or release of toxic materials. I think the release of toxic materials would be probably the most important one, but, and do we see anything else? 3 is about the public services demand. 2 is about the traffic safety, we decide on that. And property values, well.
Peter, I think we need to stay a little more focused, though.
Yeah, we do, because some of these are things that we.
I mean, property values were brought up multiple times. Is there someone that could tell us what could potentially happen to property values? Or
I
is
think,
that
that's something that we have to listen
decide?
to the inputs and, for testimony. And we, other than getting Lynn Marilyn here to say,
All right, so we're not really concerned with number 1 then, but
No.
number 2,
the
we
traffic
have a
safety.
traffic engineer come in and review the traffic plans that they have submitted to the state.
Well, again, we're discussing before we have a motion.
Well, okay.
Which we always do, don't get me wrong, it's not.
Well, I think we're trying to discuss it.
motion to make, so.
Let's go into the engineering review and to see specifically.
Engineering review on what?
That's the point, on the item number 4. The hazard.
Okay, on fire. Number 4 says fire, sorry.
Number 4 says what?
Hazard review and account potential fire explosion, release of toxic.
Potential fire explosion, release of toxic materials. So,
So this does not fall under the hydrolysis?
no, this, although the hydrology may talk about toxic materials, but, I think think we can ask our engineer to do that. He may have to consult with different people.
Well, see, we're talking about it before we have a motion.
All right.
The motion may not even pass.
Okay,
What if the
okay.
motion doesn't pass? Why are we talking about it?
All right,
That's what I'm trying to say.
how would you put this in a motion?
Well, I'm not entering a motion on it. I
Okay.
don't agree with it.
I'll move that Dennis Patel take a look at the action review, and make recommendations if he is not qualified to deal with, item number 4, and consult with somebody of his choosing to do that.
Okay, so did you get that, this may require consulting with a company that specifically deals with gas stations.
Ideally.
Okay, so, and that's fine, so, did you put that as a motion?
Yes, it's a motion.
The motion to have an engineering review of the hazards listed in number 4. Okay, and second by Megan. Now the question, the big one, is the traffic.
Oh, no, we have to have.
Oh, we get to vote, yes.
What a discussion.
Discussion. Any discussion on getting an engineering review?
I will speak on opposition to this. We have a fire department, we have hazmat people. I think it's redundant. We already have experts who are going to make sure that's done before the place is built. And I don't see any reason to incur the expense when we've already got people who are gonna take care of that before the place is even allowed to open.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't feel comfortable making a decision that needs to legally stand without more information.
Yep, that's okay too.
I think that's the big thing. Yes, we know that people, and this is what we did last time, we know that people are gonna review this, but we have to, when we say, as the attorney pointed out.
I get it, I just.
That there is no hazard.
I'm just taking another road, that's all. We're
It's
going,
gotta-
we're all
it's gotta
trying to go
be
to the
fact-
same place, I'm taking this road, you're taking that road.
It's gotta
That's
be,
okay.
it's gotta be fact-based, so, they're saying that they don't believe there's a hazard. We need someone just to say they're correct or they're
I
incorrect.
mean, every building, every structure has a hazard to
Oh,
it.
yeah,
You know.
I'm-
I mean, we've got to follow a string, we've run the string out, now we're adding string to the string. And I'm just saying, I don't think we have to do it. You do? That's okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on whether we need an engineering review to be able to answer the question number 4? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4. And no? No, 1.
Humanly no.
And any abstentions?
As long as we get along,
5 people,
we can.
that's all. Okay, yes, that's fine. And finally, I'm on the next motions on this one, the traffic study. I know that the town planner has said that he feels that's entirely the state's responsibility. However, you know.
You're not gonna make the motion, but you're commenting on it before a motion is made.
Yeah.
Somebody's gotta be a motion first.
So, does somebody want to make a motion that the traffic study be analyzed?
I will.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to have the traffic study analyzed by a third party.
Third party, okay. And second? Second by Mike.
I think it just goes along with Rick's comment, the more information we can gather.
Yeah,
to make
I
a
mean, we,
decision.
that whole number 2 item is traffic. And I don't think we can answer it without having somebody look at the traffic study.
Again, ditto with what I said the last time.
Okay. So, all those, any other comments about this?
So I just, my 2 cents, I mean,
Okay.
Glenn's been doing this for a long time. I think it's redundant also, just so.
Well, he has been, but I'm looking at 266. We had the traffic study analyzed by a third-party company then,
we spent a long, long time on Zoom just talking about the traffic effects of the.
What was the results?
The results of it were that the person who did the analysis of the traffic study felt that the traffic study was valid and that it wouldn't create, with the mitigations plans that were going to be put in effect. No, Glenn Greenwood, when this came up as a determination of regional impact, one of the criteria for determination of regional impact was the effect of traffic. And in the case of Brentwood, this is what, a quarter mile from the half mile, whatever it is, from the Brentwood line on their main artery, as it is our main artery, that it was going to, that these two projects together, but this project would have an effect on the traffic flow around Brentwood. So it was determined by us that the traffic was one of the determinations of regional impact, one of the regional impacts that we determined existed. His recommendation to the planning board, and the planning board made the same recommendation, was that, well, the traffic issue is a state issue. So he didn't think that that was necessarily a determining factor. Of the other factors, that board also voted for regional impact unanimously, so it didn't affect the question of regional impact. It just, he didn't think that was a factor in regional impact because it was a state highway. I disagree. I think that obviously traffic, there is an impact on local traffic, regardless of who owns the road, so to speak.
No, I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that Glenn's been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, no, his point wasn't that we didn't need to consider it.
Right.
His point was for the DRI that it wasn't going to be a factor for the town's analysis of the project because the state.
No, that's
so,
information.
But yeah, I mentioned that because he had said that, and but then I realized, well, why the heck did we spend hours on this on Zoom meetings
like we're doing now.
1 o'clock in the morning talking about traffic impacts if we had nothing to say about it? So.
I agree with the, if it has a regional impact, I think that's safe or understand.
Yeah, so bottom line is that somebody's going to be doing an analysis of the traffic study.
Yeah.
And Dennis said that he would defer that to someone else. So we'll have to make a recommendation of who's doing that, whether it will be the same company or not. But so I guess where were we on that? We're
We have a motion and a second, we're gonna discuss it.
and with the discussion, is there any more discussion about whether we should have a traffic study analysis in order to answer number 2 on this criteria? Okay, so I'll put it to vote. All those in favor of having an analysis of the traffic study, say aye. Aye. 4 and 1 no. Okay, do the same as on the last one.
This will go against my vote, the way it is voted. Phil Cove is absolutely right. We're not experts in this. And if you go through the reading of all this, the common thread is we're common people trying to do the right thing. And then just read through this and it's just always in there. So we're just trying to do the right thing.
So the one thing we have left to do then
you make a motion.
Is to make a motion to establish an escrow account for analysis
of the 3 studies.
Of the 3
of the review of
the review for hydrology, traffic, and engineering.
That would be my motion. Is that how did you write it down? That would be my motion. Make it easy for you.
How did you?
Make a motion to set up an escrow account. Establish an escrow account for reviews. Traffic,
Hydrology.
hydrology, I remembered, I don't know what you wanna call the other one, number 4.
Engineering.
Okay, because that included fire hazards and all that stuff.
Yeah, all the hazards. So, that's the motion, right?
Yeah.
And we need an amount, probably,
Well, no, we need a second.
well, no, we need
The
an amount in
amount
the
Well,
motion.
I thought we'd have a discussion, what do you guys think? But if you think you know how much, then I'll put it in the motion.
Well, I had written down here for the hydrology and engineering would be about 3,000 each.
So go 9 grand, think of 3 grand each?
Don't know what the calcs say, I
Well, see,
didn't.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Money,
we could go.
Not to excite.
Who's in charge? You see our one, right, we don't know how much to put in for. Can we say a reasonable amount?
Well, we'd have to put an amount in, like 5.
You have to put an amount?
We would put they have to establish an account, they have to come in with a check and establish an account. So, I would say,
Last time, did
If
we
we
say-
don't spend that much, we give it back to them?
yes, that's the escrow part of it.
But the other part of it was in the amount of so much, and then they know they, if they were to incur
Right.
more.
$3,000 per, and then subject to actual.
Right.
Yeah, we put
That's
one
what I was
day.
trying to get to.
So, yeah, I would
So, I'm gonna
say
say
establish.
$10,000 subject to actual cost.
Yeah, we're just trying to get, just trying to get an estimate of how much to put
In the
in
escrow
the escrow account, bearing in mind that if it's insufficient, for example, if a hydrogeological study is required, then we could come back for more, but I think $10,000 is gonna cover what our estimates are, and then with the understanding that if we're running low, and we need to plus up the count, we would address that.
Right, and as an applicant, I can say, I'm done.
Yes, and you can withdraw the application if you think it's too, or you can say, you can vote on what the information, with the information you have, and, you know, either it could, there's a number of things you can do, but that's getting the cart before the horse. I think we just put the amount in there.
Yeah,
and
10 grand.
$10,000.
Yeah, 10, I'm sorry, 10,000.
I will
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, that's sure the second,
Who's
okay.
second?
This is not rocket science.
Pick one.
Yeah, it is.
None of you spoke up for it.
We're all getting a little hoopy here.
And, you have the paperwork for that here, the Patriot Act and the escrow stuff. And so, just assume when we're done here, we're gonna be having to take a motion, another motion, which would be to continue.
We need a vote on this.
Yeah, we haven't voted on this, but, so any other discussion on this, on the motion that's on the floor now? Okay, so all those in favor, establishing test. Account for 10,000, all right. Aye, and that's unanimous, 5-0, and no abstentions. So, is there any other thing we need to discuss and vote on tonight before we vote on a continuation? Someone's got, I got a calendar on here, and can bring it up.
No, I just find it interesting, when we take our phones to look at the calendar.
All right, so the second Thursday in July.
We do the third, we get 3 studies, we go to the third.
We don't wanna go.
Well, that's the next question.
You wanna go all the way to July? Yeah, that makes sense, because they need time.
Well, that's the question is, we're in June, talking about 1 week more than a month. And I think the hydro review can be done, I think the engineering reviews, traffic study,
I'm not sure.
Well, if you think you'll have time to do it at the end of this month, or you wanna go into July?
Oh, no, we have to we have to give them at least a month.
Okay.
So,
We're into
that's
July.
my suggestion, our next, getting back on schedule for meeting would be the 13th of July.
Okay.
And so, we would need your agreement. We have a state law now, in fact this year, that requires us to come up with a decision within 90 days. And one of the reasons we met this week instead of next was because our own procedures require that we hold a hearing within 45 days of the application. So that's why we're meeting a week early for this one. That being said, if we go another month, we'll still be within the 90 days, so we don't really need to worry about the shot clock. But I think, how many days would that be? 75, yeah, it would be fine. So with your concurrence for a continuation, I assume that that would be something you would like to have, as opposed to having us make a decision without the information tonight?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah, I have to ask. All right, yeah. So that my recommendation would be, and I can make this motion, that we continue this hearing until 7 p.m. July 13th at the town hall.
That's 7:30. Can you make it 7:30?
Would that be, is it, my concern is that my concern is that we push things late and we're getting technical advice that we not push it back too far. I mean, the planning board took it too far the other way, went to 6:30 so that they could be done by 11 every night. Yeah, I think that's our regular meeting time as in our procedures, and I think that would be a good time. You know, we do board business first and then probably start by 7:10 or something. If we're a little bit late, that's probably not too bad. And we will go through the motions of contacting probably Glenn and whoever to find out who we're going to be doing this. Dana, we can get.
Did you make a motion?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna
I
make a
made
motion.
the motion, sorry, make the motion that we continue this meeting to July 13th at 7 p.m. at the town hall. Second by Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, voting members, is that nine? I know.
It's
you-
a thumbs up.
Okay.
If you were wrong, I don't know if that was that
Yeah,
bad of a
that's
thing.
That's
I
what
thought
we're
it was
doing,
7:30.
7:30.
If we have to do, so I'd rather tweak stuff.
Up to you.
Yeah, it's, like something,
I can go to next week.
Fine. Yeah, I don't want to get back off our schedule. I'm pretty sure even until around by next week. So, we've taken the motion to continue, and is there any other board business to discuss?
If it is, wait until next time.
Yeah, if it is, yeah.
Please, no.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn, second? Second?
Yeah, the question.
Oh, yeah, Ben.
Do we just have to, this is continuation of this meeting, the time dates are actually 13? You did. Because we're not gonna send notifications.
Okay, yeah, for the people in the room, this is your only notification, you won't get a second a butter notification. This is notification that this meeting is continued to the 13th of July. At the regular time, so, thank you. Good point. We always do that, make that announcement, but done with continuation. We never, okay, and it was seconded, we,